Novel Stream presents Three-Bladed Doom by Robert E. Howard. Chapter 1. The Knife, Allah the Knife. It was the scruff of swift and stealthy feet in the darkened doorway. He had just passed that warned Gordon. He wheeled just in time to see a tall figure lunging at him from that black arch. It was dark in the narrow, alley-like street, but Gordon glimpsed a fierce, bearded face, the gleam of steel in the lifted hand, even as he avoided the blow with a twist of his whole body. The knife ripped his shirt, and before the assassin could recover his balance, the American caught his arm and crashed the long barrel of his heavy pistol down on the fellow's head. The man crumpled to the earth without a sound. Gordon stood over him, listening with tense expectancy. Up the street, around the next corner, he caught the shuffle of sandaled feet, the muffled clink of steel. These sinister sounds told him the nighted streets of Kabul were a death trap for Francis Xavier Gordon. He hesitated, half lifting the big gun, then shrugged his shoulders and hurried down the street, swerving wide of the dark arches that gaped in the walls which lined it. He turned into another, wider street, and a few moments later rapped softly on a door above which burned a brass lantern. The door opened almost instantly, and Gordon stepped quickly inside. "Lock the door." The tall, bearded Afridi, who had admitted the American, shot home the heavy bolt and turned, tugging his beard perturbedly as he inspected his friend. "Your shirt is gashed under the arm, Borak," he rumbled. "A man tried to knife me," answered Gordon. Others followed. The Afridi's fierce eyes blazed, and he laid a sinewy hand on the 3-foot Khyber knife that jutted from his hip. "Let us sally forth and slay the dog, Sahib," he urged. Gordon shook his head. He was not a large man, but his thick chest, corded neck, and square shoulders hinted at strength, speed, and endurance almost primordial in nature. "Let them go. They're the enemies of Baber Khan, who knew that I went to the Emir tonight to urge him to pardon the man." "And what said the Emir?" "He's determined on Baber Khan's destruction. The chief's enemies have poisoned the Emir against him, and then Baber Khan's stubborn. He's refused to come to Kabul and answer charges of sedition. The Emir swears he'll march within the week and lay Kor in ashes and take Baber Khan's head, unless the chief comes in voluntarily and surrenders. Baber Khan's enemies don't want him to do that. They know the charges they've made against him wouldn't stand up with me defending his case. That's why they're trying to put me out of the way, but they don't dare strike openly. I'm going to see if I can't persuade Baber Khan to come in and surrender." "That the chief of Kor will never do," predicted the Afridi. "Probably not, but I'm going to try. Wake up Ahmed Shah and get the horses ready while I throw a pack together." The Afridi did not comment on the risk of night travel in the hills or mention the lateness of the hour. Men who ride with Borak are accustomed to hard riding at all ungodly hours. "What of the Sikh?" he asked as he turned away. "He remains at the palace. The Emir trusts Lal Singh more than his own guards, and he's been nervous ever since the Sultan of Turkey was attacked by that fanatic. Hurry up, Yar Ali Khan. Baber Khan's enemies are probably watching the house, but they don't know about that door that lets into the alley behind the stables. We'll slip out that way." The huge Afridi strode into an inner chamber and shook the man sleeping there on a heap of carpets. "Awake, son of Shaitan, we ride westward." Ahmed Shah, a stocky Yusufzai, sat up yawning. "Where?" "To the Gilzai village of Kor, where the rebel dog Baber Khan will doubtless cut all our throats," growled Yar Ali Khan. Ahmed Shah grinned broadly as he rose. "You have no love for the Gils, but he is Borak's friend." Yar Ali Khan scowled and muttered direly in his beard as he stalked out into the inner courtyard and headed for the stables. These lay within the high enclosure, and no one but the members of Gordon's family knew that a hidden door connected them with an outer alley. So all the shadowy figures that lurked about his house that night were watching the other sides of the compound when the small party moved stealthily down the black alley. Within half an hour from the time Gordon rapped at his door, the clink of hoofs on the rocky road beyond the city wall marked the passing of 3 men who rode swiftly westward. Meanwhile in the palace, the Emir of Afghanistan was proving the adage concerning the uneasiness of the head that wears the crown. He emerged from an inner chamber, wearing a preoccupied expression, and absently returned the salute of a tall, magnificently shouldered Sikh who clicked his booted heels and came to military attention. The Emir turned up the corridor, indicating with a gesture that he wished to be alone, so Lal Singh saluted again and fell back, resuming his station by the door, one hand absently caressing the shark-skin-bound hilt of his long saber. His dark eyes followed the Emir up the corridor. He knew that his friend Borak had been closeted with the king for several hours, and had left with an abruptness that hinted at anger. This interview was likewise on the Emir's mind, as he entered a large lamplit chamber and crossed toward a gold-barred window that overlooked the sleeping city. It was the first rift in his relationship with the American, who acted as unofficial advisor, counsel, ambassador, and Secret Service department. Hedged in by powerful nations which used his mountain kingdom as a pawn in their game of empire, the Emir leaned heavily on the Western adventurer, who had proved his reliability scores of times in the past. The Emir frowned from his troubled spirit, glancing idly at a curtain which masked an alcove, and absently reflecting that the wind must be rising, since the tapestry swayed lightly. He glanced at the gold-barred window and instantly went cold all over. The light curtains there hung motionless, yet the hangings over the alcove had stirred. The Emir was a powerful man, with plenty of personal courage. Almost instinctively he sprang, seized the tapestries and tore them apart, a dagger in a dark hand licked from between them, and smote him full in the breast. He cried out as he went down, dragging his assailant with him. The man snarled like a wild beast, his dilated eyes glaring madly. His dagger ribboned the Emir's khalat, revealing the mail shirt which had saved the ruler's life more than once. Outside, a deep shout echoed the Emir's lusty yells for help, and booted feet pounded down the corridor. The Emir had grasped his attacker by the throat and the knife wrist, but the man's stringy muscles were like knots of steel. As they rolled on the floor, the dagger, glancing from the links of the mail shirt, fleshed itself in arm, thigh, and hand. Then, as the bravo heaved the weakening ruler under him, grasped his throat and lifted the knife again. Something flashed in the lamplight like a jet of blue lightning, and the murderer collapsed, his head split to the teeth. "Your Majesty, my lord," Alal Singh was pale under his black beard. "Are you slain? Nay, you bleed, wait." He thrust the corpse aside and lifted the emir. The ruler was gasping for breath and covered with blood, his own and his attacker's. He sank on a divan, and the Sikh began ripping strips of silk from the hangings to bind his wounds. "Look," gasped the emir, pointing. His face was livid, his hand shook. "The knife, Allah, the knife." It lay glinting dully by the dead man's hand, a curious weapon, with 3 blades sprouting from the same hilt. Lal Singh started and swore beneath his breath. "The triple-bladed dagger," panted the emir, a terrible fear flooding his eyes. "The same weapon that struck at the Sultan of Turkey, the Shah of Persia, the Nizam of Hyderabad." "The mark of the hidden ones," muttered Lal Singh, uneasily eyeing the ominous symbol of the terrible cult which within the past year had struck again and again at the men occupying the high places of the East. The noise had roused the palace. Men were running down the corridors, shouting to know what had happened. "Shut the door," exclaimed the emir. "Admit no one but the major domo of the palace." "But we must have a physician, your Majesty," protested the Sikh. "These wounds will not slay of themselves, but the dagger might have been poisoned." "Then send someone for a hakim. Ya Allah, the hidden ones have marked me for doom." The emir was a brave man, but his experience had shaken him terribly. Who can fight the dagger in the dark, the serpent underfoot, the poison in the wine cup? "Lal Singh, go swiftly to Borak's house and tell him I have desperate need of him. Bring him to me. If there is one man in Afghanistan who can protect me from these hidden devils, it is he." Lal Singh saluted and hurried from the chamber, shaking his head at the sight of fear in the countenance where fear had never showed before. There was reason in the emir's fear. A strange and terrible cult had risen in the East. Who its members were, what their ultimate purpose was, none knew. They were called the Hidden Ones, and they slew with a 3-bladed dagger. That was all that was known about them. Their agents appeared suddenly, struck and disappeared, or else were slain, refusing to be taken alive. Some considered them to be merely religious fanatics. Others believed their activities to possess a political significance. Lal Singh knew that not even Gordon had any definite information about them, and the Sikh was pessimistic of even Borak's being able to protect the emir from these slinking hounds of death, who moved like shadows in the night. 3 days after his hurried departure from Kabul, Gordon sat cross-legged in the trail where it looped over the rock ridge to follow the slope down to the village of Kor. "I stand between you and death," he warned the man who sat opposite him. This man tugged his purple-stained beard reflectively. He was broad and powerful, and his Bakhariot girdle bristled with dagger hilts. And he was Baber Khan, chief of the fierce Ghilzai, an absolute overlord of Kor and its 300 wild swordsmen. But there was no hint of arrogance in his answer. "Allah favor thee, yet what man can pass the spot of his death? I offer you an opportunity to make your peace with the emir." Baber Khan shook his head with the fatalism of his race. "I have too many enemies at court. If I went to Kabul, the emir would listen to their lies and would hang me up in an iron cage for the kites to eat. Nay, I will not go. Then take your people and find another abode. There are places in these hills where not even the emir could follow you. Baber Khan glanced down the rocky slope to the cluster of mud and stone towers that rose above the encircling wall. His thin nostrils expanded, and into his eyes came a dark flame like that of an eagle which surveys its eyrie. Nay, by Allah, my clan has held court since the days of Akbar. Let the emir rule in Kabul. This is mine. The emir will likewise rule in Kor, grunted Yar Ali Khan, squatting behind Gordon with Ahmed Shah. Baber Khan glanced in the other direction, where the trail disappeared to the east between jutting crags. On these crags, bits of white cloth were blown out on the wind, which the watchers knew were the garments of the riflemen who guarded the pass day and night. "Let him come," said Baber Khan grimly. "We hold the passes." "He'll bring 5,000 men with artillery," warned Gordon. "He'll burn Kor and take your head back to Kabul." "Inshallah," agreed Baber Khan, indomitable fatalistic. As so often in the past, Gordon fought down a rising anger at this invincible Oriental characteristic. Every instinct of his strenuous nature was a negation of this inert philosophy. But just now the matter seemed at a deadlock, and he said nothing, but sat staring at the western crags where the sun hung, a ball of fire in the sharp, windy blue. Baber Khan, supposing that Gordon's silence signified recognition of defeat, dismissed the matter with a wave of his hand and said, "Sahib, there is something I desire to show you. Down in yonder ruined hut which stands outside the wall, there lies a dead man, the like of which was never seen by any man of Kor before. Even in death he is strange and evil, and I think he is no natural man at all. But the sharp spang of a rifle shot echoed among the crags to the east, and instantly all 4 men were on their feet, facing that way. A shift in the wind brought the sound of angry shouting to them. Then a figure appeared on the cliffs, leaping agilely from ledge to ledge. He danced like a mountain devil, brandishing his rifle, his ragged cloak whipped out on the wind. "Oh, hi, Baber Khan," he yelled, straining above the gusts. "A Sikh on a foundered horse is beyond the pass. He demands speech with Borak." "A Sikh," snapped Gordon, stiffening. "Let him through at once." Baber Khan relayed the command in a bellow that vibrated among the cliffs, and the man swarmed back up the ledges. Presently, a man appeared in the pass on a horse which seemed ready to drop at each step. Its head drooped, and its coat was plastered with foam and sweat. "Lal Singh, what are you doing here?" "By Krishna, Sahib," the Sikh grimaced as he slid stiffly to the ground. "Well are you named Borak the Swift. I do not think you were more than an hour ahead of me when I rode out of Kabul, but strive as I would, on a fresh horse seized at every village I passed, I could not overtake you." "Your news must be urgent, Lal Singh." "It is, Sahib," the Sikh assured him. "The emir sent me after you to beg you to return instantly to Kabul. The triple-bladed doom has struck." Gordon's hard body tensed as that of a hound which scents peril in the wind. "Tell me about it," he commanded, and in a few terse words Lal Singh sketched the attack on the emir. "At your quarters I learned you had departed for Kor," said Lao Singh. "I returned to the palace, and the emir urged me to follow you and bring you back. He was sick of his wounds and nearly dead with terror." "Did he say anything about the expedition he planned to lead against Kor?" asked Gordon. "Nay, Sahib, but I think he will not leave the palace until you return. Certainly not until his wounds heal, if indeed he does not die of the poison with which the dagger blades were smeared." "You have received a reprieve of fate," said Gordon to Baber Khan, and to Lao Singh he said, "Come down to the village, eat and sleep. We'll start for Kabul at dawn." As the 5 men started down the slope, with the weary horse plodding after them, Baber Khan asked Gordon, "What is your thought, El Borak?" "That somebody's pulling strings in Constantinople, or in Moscow, or in Berlin," answered the American. "So, I deemed these hidden ones mere fanatics." "More than that, I fear," said Gordon. "Apparently it's a secret society with anarchistic principles, but I've noticed that every ruler who's been killed or attacked has been an ally or a friend of the British Empire, so I believe some European power is behind them." "But what were you going to show me?" "A corpse in a broken hut." Baber Khan turned aside and led them toward the hovel. "My warriors came upon him lying at the base of a cliff from which he had fallen or been thrown. I made them bring him here, but he died on the way, babbling in a strange tongue. My people feared it would bring a curse on the village. They deem him a magician, and with good cause. A long day's journey southward, among mountains so wild and barren not even a Pathan could dwell among them, lies a country we call Gulistan." "Gulistan," Gordon echoed the sinister phrase. "In Turkish or Tatar it means land of roses, but in Arabic it means the country of the ghouls." "An evil region of black crags and wild gorges, shunned by wise men. It seems uninhabited, yet men dwell there, men or demons. Sometimes a man is slain or a child or woman stolen from a lonely trail, and we know it is their work. We have followed, have glimpsed shadowy figures moving through the night, but always the trail ends against a blank cliff through which only a demon could pass. Sometimes we have heard the voice of the jinn echoing among the crags. It is a sound to turn men's hearts to ice." They had reached the ruined hut, and Baber Khan pulled open the sagging door. A moment later the 5 men were bending over a figure which sprawled on the dirt floor. It was a figure alien and incongruous, that of a short, squat man with broad, square, flat features, colored like dark copper, and narrow, slant eyes, an unmistakable son of the Gobi. Blood clotted the thick black hair on the back of his head, and the unnatural position of his body told of shattered bones. "Has he not the look of a magician?" asked Baber Khan uneasily. "He's no wizard," answered Gordon. "He's a Mongol from a country far to the east, but what he's doing here is more than I can say." Suddenly his black eyes blazed, and he snatched and tore the blood-stained khalat away from the squat throat. A stained woolen shirt came into view, and Yar Ali Khan, looking over Gordon's shoulder, grunted explosively. On the shirt, worked in thread so crimson it might at first glance have been mistaken for a splash of blood, appeared a curious emblem. A human fist grasping a hilt from which jutted 3 double-edged blades. "The triple-bladed knife," whispered Baber Khan, recoiling from that dread symbol which had come to embody a harbinger of death and destruction to the rulers of the East. All looked at Gordon, but he said nothing. He stared down at the sinister emblem, trying to capture a vague train of associations. It roused dim memories of an ancient and evil cult which used that same symbol long ago. "Can you have your men guide me to the spot where you found this man, Baber Khan?" he asked at last. "Aye, Sahib, but it is an evil place. It is in the Gorge of Ghosts, close to the borders of Gulistan, and good. Lal Singh, you and the others go and sleep. We ride at dawn." "To Kabul, Sahib." "No, to Gulistan." "Then you think." "I think nothing yet. I go in search of knowledge." Chapter 2. The Black Country. Dusk was mantling the serrated skyline when Gordon's Gill's guide halted. Ahead of them, the rugged terrain was broken by a deep canyon, and beyond the canyon rose a forbidding array of black crags and frowning cliffs, a wild, hag-like chaos of broken black rock. "There begins Gulistan," said the Ghilzai, and his hook-nosed comrades loosened their knives and clicked their rifle bolts. "Beyond that gorge, the Gorge of Ghosts, begins the country of horror and death. We go no further, Sahib." Gordon nodded, his eyes picking out a trail that looped down rugged slopes into the canyon. It was the fading trace of an ancient road they had been following for many miles, but it looked as if it had been used frequently, and lately. The Ghilzai nodded, divining his thought. "That trail is well-traveled of late. By it the demons of the Black Mountains come and go, but men who follow it will not return." Yar Ali Khan jeered, though he secretly shared their superstitions. What need demons with a trail? "When they take the shape of men, they walk like men," Ahmed Shah grunted in his bushy beard. "Demons fly with wings like a bat," asserted Yar Ali Khan. The Gills ignored the Afridi and pointed to the jutting ledge over which the trail wound. "At the foot of that slope, we found the man you called a Mongol. Doubtless his brother demons quarreled with him and cast him down." "Doubtless he tripped and fell," grunted Gordon. "Mongols are desert men. They're not used to mountain climbing, and their legs are bowed and weakened by a life in the saddle. Such a one would stumble easily on a narrow trail." "If he was a man, perhaps," conceded the Gills. "I still say Allah." All except Gordon started convulsively, and the Ghilzais turned pale and threw up their rifles, glaring wildly. Out over the crags from the south rolled an incredible sound, a strident, braying roar that vibrated among the mountains. "The voice of the jinn," ejaculated the Ghilzai, unconsciously jerking the reins so his horse squealed and reared. "Sahib, in the name of Allah, let us be gone. It is madness to remain here." "Go back to your village if you are afraid. I'm going on." "Baber Khan will weep for thee," the leader of the band yelled reproachfully over his shoulder as he kicked his pony into a wild run. "He loves thee like a brother. There will be woe in Kor." "Aya, Ahai, Ohi." His lamentations died away amidst the clatter of hoofs on stone as the Ghilzais, flogging their ponies hard, topped a ridge and vanished from view. "Run, sons of noseless dams," yelled Yar Ali Khan. "We will brand your devils and drag them to Kor by their tails." but he fell mute the instant the victims were out of hearing. Ahmed Shah shifted nervously in his saddle, and Yar Ali Khan tugged at his patriarchal beard and eyed Gordon sidewise, like an apprehensive ghoul with a 3-foot knife. But Borak spoke to Lal Singh. "Have you ever heard a sound like that before?" The tall Sikh nodded. "Yes, Sahib, in the mountains of the devil worshippers." Gordon lifted his reins without comment. He too had heard the roar of the 10-foot bronze trumpets that blare over the bare black mountains of forbidden Mongolia, in the hands of shaven-headed priests of Erlik. Yar Ali Khan snorted. He had not heard those trumpets, and he had not been consulted. He thrust his horse in ahead of Lal Singh, so as to be next to Gordon as they rode down the steep slopes in the purple dusk. He bared his teeth at the Sikh and said roughly to Gordon, "Now that we have been lured into this country of devils by treacherous Ghilzai dogs who will undoubtedly steal back and cut the Sahib's throat while he sleeps, what have you planned for us?" It might have been a gaunt old wolfhound growling at his master for patting another dog. Gordon bent his head and spat to hide a grin. "We'll camp in the canyon tonight," he said. "The horses are tired, and there's no point in struggling through these gulches in the dark. Tomorrow we'll begin our exploring." That Mongol must have been on foot when he fell. If he'd been on a horse, he wouldn't have fallen unless the horse fell too. The Ghilzai didn't find a dead horse, and being afoot, it's certain that he wasn't far from some camp. A Mongol wouldn't walk far if he could help it. "I believe that the Hidden Ones have a rendezvous somewhere in that country across the gorge. The hills hereabouts are very thinly settled. Kor is the nearest village, and it's a long, hard day's ride away, as we've found. Wandering clans stay out of these parts, fearing the Ghilzais, and Baber Khan's men are too superstitious to investigate much across that gorge. The Hidden Ones, hiding over there somewhere, could come and go almost undetected. That old road we've been following most of the day used to be a caravan route, centuries ago, and it's still practicable for men on horses. Better still, it doesn't pass near any villages and isn't used by the tribes now. Men following it could get to within a day's ride of Kabul without much fear of being seen by anyone. I don't know just what we'll do. We'll keep our eyes open and await developments. Our actions will depend on circumstances. Our destiny," said Gordon without cynicism, "is on Allah's knees." "La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasul-ullah," agreed Yar Ali Khan sonorously, completely mollified. As they came down into the canyon, they saw that the trail led across the rock-strewn floor and into the mouth of a deep, narrow gorge which debouched into the canyon from the south. The south wall of the canyon was higher than the north wall and much more sheer. It swept up in a sullen rampart of solid black rock, broken at intervals by narrow gorge mouths. Gordon rode into the gulch in which the trail wound and followed it to the first bend, finding that bend was but the first of a succession of kinks. The ravine, running between sheer walls of rock, writhed and twisted like the track of a serpent, and was already filled to the brim with darkness. "This is our road tomorrow," said Gordon, and his men nodded silently, as he led them back to the main canyon, where some light still lingered, ghostly in the thickening dusk. The clang of their horses' hoofs on the flint seemed startlingly loud in the sullen, brutish silence. A few hundred feet west of the trail ravine another, narrower gulch opened into the canyon. Its rock floor showed no sign of any trail, and it narrowed so rapidly that Gordon believed it ended in a blind alley. About halfway between these ravine mouths, but near the north wall, which was at that point precipitous, a tiny spring bubbled up in a natural basin of age-hollowed rock. Behind it, in a cave-like niche in the cliff, dry, wiry grass grew sparsely, and there they tethered the weary horses. They camped at the spring, eating from tins, not risking a fire which might be seen from afar by hostile eyes, though they realized that there was a chance that they had been seen by hidden watchers already. There is always that chance in the hills. The tents had been left in core. Blankets spread on the ground were luxuries enough for Gordon and his hardy followers. His position seemed a strategic one. The party could not be attacked from the north because of the sheer cliffs. No one could reach the horses without first passing through the camp. Gordon made provisions against surprise from the south, east, or west. He divided his party into 2 watches. Lal Singh he placed on guard west of the camp, near the mouth of the narrower ravine, and Ahmed Shah had his station close to the mouth of the eastern ravine. Any hostile band coming up or down the canyon, or entering it from either ravine, would have to pass these sentries, whose vigilance Gordon had proven many times in the past. Later in the night he and Yar Ali Khan would take their places. Darkness came swiftly in the canyon, seeming to flow in almost tangible waves down the black slopes and ooze out of the blacker mouths of the ravines. Stars blinked out, cold, white, and impersonal. Above the invaders brooded the great dusky bulks of the broken mountains, and as Gordon fell asleep, he was wondering what grim spectacles they had witnessed since the beginning of time, and what inhuman creatures had crept through them before man was. Primitive instincts, slumbering in the average man, are wedded to razor edge by a life of constant hazard. Gordon awoke the instant Yar Ali Khan touched him, and at once, before the Afridi spoke, the American knew that peril was in the air. The tense grasp on his shoulder spoke plainly to him of imminent danger. He came up on one knee instantly, gun in hand. "What is it?" Yar Ali Khan crouched beside him, gigantic shoulders bulking dimly in the gloom. The Afridi's eyes glimmered like a cat's in the dark. Back in the shadow of the cliffs, the unseen horses moved restively, the only sound in the nighted canyon. "Danger, Sahib," hissed the Afridi. "Close about us, creeping upon us in the dark. Ahmed Shah is slain." "What?" "He lies near the mouth of the ravine with his throat cut from ear to ear. I dreamed that death was stealing upon us as we slept, and the fear of the dream awoke me. Without rousing you, I stole to the mouth of the eastern ravine, and lo, there lay Ahmed Shah in his blood. He must have died silently and suddenly. I saw no one, heard no sound in the ravine, which was as black as the mouth of hell. Then I hastened along the south wall to the western ravine and found no one. I speak truth, Allah be my witness. Ahmed is dead and Lal Singh is gone. The devils of the hills have slain one and snatched away the other without waking us, we who sleep lightly as cats. No sound came from the ravine before which the Sikh had his post. I saw nothing, heard nothing, but I sensed death skulking there. Sahib, what men could have done away with such warriors as Lal Singh and Ahmed Shah without a sound?" This gorge is indeed the gorge of ghosts." Gordon made no reply, but crouched on his knee, straining eyes and ears into the darkness, while he considered the astounding thing that had occurred. It did not occur to him to doubt the Afridi's statements. He could trust the man as he trusted his own eyes and ears. That Yar Ali Khan could have stolen away without awakening even him was not surprising, for the Afridi was of that breed of men who glide naked through the mists to steal rifles from the guarded tents of the English army. But that Ahmed Shah should have died, and Lal Singh been spirited away without the sound of a struggle smacked of the diabolical. "Who can fight devils, Sahib? Let us mount the horses and ride and listen." Somewhere a bare foot scruffed on the rock floor. Gordon rose, peering into the gloom. Men were moving out there in the darkness. Shadows detached themselves from the black background and slunk forward. Gordon drew the scimitar he had buckled on at core, thrusting his pistol back into its scabbard. Lal Singh was a captive out there, possibly in line of fire. Yar Ali Khan crouched beside him, gripping his Khyber knife, silent now and deadly as a wolf at bay, convinced that they were facing ghoulish fiends of the dark mountains, but ready to fight men or devils if Gordon so willed it. The dim-seen line moved in slowly, widening as it came, and Gordon and the Afridi fell back a few paces to have the rock wall at their backs and prevent themselves from being surrounded by those phantom-like figures. The rush came suddenly, impetuously, bare feet slapping softly over the rocky floor, steel glinting dully in the dim starlight. The men at bay could make out few details of their assailants, only the bulks of them and the shimmer of steel. They struck and parried by instinct and feel as much as by sight. Gordon killed the first man to come within sword reach, and Yar Ali Khan, galvanized by the realization that their foes were human after all, sounded a deep yell and exploded in a berserk burst of wolfish ferocity. Towering above the squat figures, his 3-foot knife overreached the blades that hacked at him, and its sweep was devastating. Side by side, with the wall at their backs, the two companions were safe from attack on rear or flank. Steel rang sharp on steel and blue sparks flew, momentarily lighting wild, bearded faces. There rose the ugly butcher shop sound of blades cleaving flesh and bone, and men screamed or gasped death gurgles from severed jugulars. For a few moments, a huddled knot writhed and milled near the rock wall. The work was too swift and blind and desperate to allow much consecutive thought or plan. But the advantage was with the men at bay. They could see as well as their attackers. Man for man, they were stronger and more agile, and they knew when they struck their steel would flesh itself only in enemy bodies. The others were handicapped by their numbers, and the knowledge that they might kill a companion with a blind stroke must surely have tempered their frenzy. Gordon, ducking a sword before he realized he had seen it swinging at him, experienced a brief pulse of surprise. Thrice his blade had grated against something yielding but impenetrable. These men were wearing shirts of mail. He slashed where he knew unprotected thighs and heads and necks would be, and men spurted their blood on him as they died. Then the rush ebbed as suddenly as it had flooded. The attackers gave way and melted like phantoms into the darkness. That darkness had become not quite so absolute. The eastern rims of the canyon were lined with a silvery fire that marked the rising of the moon. Yar Ali Khan gave tongue like a wolf and charged after the retreating figures, foam of aroused bloodlust flecking his beard. He stumbled over a corpse, stabbed savagely downward before he realized it was a dead man, and then Gordon grabbed his arm and pulled him back. He almost dragged the powerful American off his feet as he plunged like a lassoed bull, breathing gustily. "Wait, you idiot. Do you want to run into a trap? Let them go." Yar Ali Khan subsided to a wolfish wariness that was no less deadly than his berserk fury, and together they glided cautiously after the vague figures which disappeared in the mouth of the eastern ravine. There the pursuers halted, peering warily into the black depths. Somewhere, far down it, a dislodged pebble rattled on the stone, and both men tensed involuntarily, reacting like suspicious panthers. "The dogs did not halt," muttered Yar Ali Khan. "They flee still. Shall we follow them?" He did not speak with conviction, and Gordon merely shook his head. Not even they dared plunge into that well of blackness, where ambushes might make every step a march of death. They fell back to the camp and the frightened horses, which were frantic with the stench of fresh spilt blood. "When the moon rises high enough to flood the canyon with light," quoth Yar Ali Khan, "they will shoot us from the ravine." "That's a chance we must take," grunted Gordon. "Maybe they're not good shots." With the tiny beam of his pocket flashlight, Gordon investigated the 4 dead men left behind by the attackers. The thin pencil of light moved from face to bearded face, and Yar Ali Khan grunted and swore. "Devil worshippers by the beard of Allah, Yezidis, sons of Melek Taus. No wonder they could creep like cats through the dark," muttered Gordon, who well knew the uncanny stealth possessed by the people of that ancient and abominable cult which worshipped the brazen peacock on Mount Lalish the Accursed. Yar Ali Khan made a sign calculated to exorcise devils, which might be expected to be lurking near the place where their votaries had died. "Come away, Sahib. It is not fitting that you should touch this carrion." No wonder they stole and slew like the jinn of silence. They are children of night and darkness, and they partake of the attributes of the elements which gave them birth. "But what are they doing here?" mused Gordon. "Their homeland is in Syria about Mount Lalish. It's the last stronghold of their race, to which they were driven by Christian and Moslem alike. A Mongol from the Gobi and devil worshippers from Syria. What's the connection?" He grasped the coarse woolen collet of the nearest corpse and swore down Yar Ali Khan's instant objections. "That flesh is accursed," sulked the Afridi, looking like a scandalized ghoul, with the dripping knife in his hand, and blood trickling down his beard from a broken tooth. "It is not fit for a sahib such as you to handle. If it must be done, let me—" "Oh, shut up. Ha, just as I thought." The tiny beam rested on the linen jerkin, which covered the thick chest of the mountaineer. There gleamed, like a splash of fresh blood, the emblem of a hand gripping a 3-bladed dagger. "Wallah," discarding his scruples, Yar Ali Khan ripped the collats from the other 3 corpses. Each displayed the fist and dagger. "Are Mongols Mohammedans, Sahib?" he asked presently. "Some are, but that man in Baber Khan's hut was. His canine teeth were filed to sharp points. He was a priest of Erlik, the yellow god of death. Cannibalism is part of their rituals. The man who sought the life of the Turkish Sultan was a Kurd, mused Yar Ali Khan. Some of them worship Melek Taus, too, secretly. But it was an Arab who slew the Shah of Persia and a Delhi Moslem who fired at the viceroy. What would true Mohammedans be doing in a society which includes Mongol pagans and Yazidi devil worshippers? That's what we're here to find out, answered Gordon, snapping off the electric torch. They squatted in the shadow of the cliffs, in silence, as the moonlight, weird and ghostly, grew in the canyon, and rock and ledge and wall took shape. No sound disturbed the brooding quiet. Yar Ali Khan rose at last and stood up etched in the witch-light glow, a fair target for anyone lurking in the ravine mouth. But no shot followed. What now? Gordon pointed to dark splotches on the bare rock floor that the moonlight made visible and distinct. They've left us a trail a child could follow. Without a word, Yar Ali Khan sheathed his knife and secured his rifle from among the pack rolls near the blankets. Gordon armed himself in like manner, and also fastened to his belt a coil of thin, strong rope with a short iron hook at one end of it. He had found such a rope invaluable time and again in mountain travel. The moon had risen higher, lighting the canyon, drawing a thin thread of silver along the middle of the ravine. That was enough light for men like Gordon and Yar Ali Khan. Through the moonlight they approached the ravine mouth, rifles in hand, limbed clearly for any marksman who, after all, might be skulking there, but ready to take the chances of luck or fate or fortune, or whatever it is that decides the destiny of men on blind trails. No shot cracked, no furtive figures flitted among the shadows. The blood drops sprinkled thickly the rocky floor. Obviously, the Yazidis had carried some grim wounds away with them. Gordon thought of Ahmed Shah, lying dead back there in the canyon without a cairn to cover his body. But the Yusufzai was past hurting, and Lal Singh was a prisoner in the hands of men to whom mercy was unknown. Later the dead could be taken care of. Just now the task at hand was to rescue the living, if, indeed, the Yazidis had not already killed their prisoner. They pushed up the ravine without hesitation, rifles cocked. They went afoot, for they believed their enemies were on foot, unless horses were hidden somewhere up the ravine. The gulch was so narrow and rugged that a horseman would be at a fatal disadvantage in any kind of a fight. At each bend of the ravine they expected and were prepared for an ambush, but the trail of blood drops led on, and no figures barred their way. The blood spots were not so thick now, but they were still sufficient to mark the way. Gordon quickened his pace, hopeful of overtaking the Yazidis, who now were undoubtedly in flight. They had a long start, but if, as he believed, they were carrying one or more wounded men, and were also burdened with a prisoner who would not make things any easier for them than he could help, that lead might be rapidly cut down. He believed the Sikh was alive, since they had not found his body, and if the Yazidis had killed him, they would have had no reason for hiding the corpse. The ravine pitched steeply upward, narrowing, then widened as it descended and abruptly made a crook and came out into another canyon running roughly east and west, and only a few hundred feet wide. The blood-spattered trail ran straight across to the sheer south wall and ceased. Yar Ali Khan grunted, The Ghilzai dog spoke truth. The trail stops at a cliff that only a bird could fly over. Gordon halted at the foot of the cliff, puzzled. They had lost the trace of the ancient road in the Gorge of Ghosts, but this was the way the Yezidis had come, without a doubt. Blood spattered a trail to the foot of the cliffs, then ceased as if those who bled had simply dissolved into thin air. He ran his eyes up the sheer pitch of the wall, which rose straight up for hundreds of feet. Directly above him, at a height of some 15 feet, a narrow ledge jutted, a mere outcropping some 10 or 15 feet in length and only a few feet wide. It seemed to offer no solution to the mystery, but halfway up to the ledge, he saw a dull reddish smear on the rock of the wall. Uncoiling his rope, Gordon whirled the weighted end about his head and sent it curving upward. The hook bit into the rim of the ledge and held, and Gordon went up it, climbing the thin, smooth strand as swiftly and easily as most men would manipulate a rope ladder. Skill acquired in the riggings of sailing ships in all the 7 seas came to his aid here. As he passed the smear on the stone, he confirmed his belief that it was dried blood. A wounded man being hauled up to the ledge, or climbing as he was climbing, might have left such a smear. Yar Ali Khan, below him, fidgeted with his rifle, trying to get a better view of the ledge, which his pessimistic imagination peopled with assassins lying prone and unseen. But the shelf lay bare when Gordon pulled himself over the edge. The first thing he saw was a heavy iron ring set deep in the stone above the ledge, out of sight of anyone below. The metal was worn bright as if by the friction of much usage. More blood was smeared thickly at the place where a man would come up over the rim if he climbed a rope fastened to the ring or was hoisted. Yet more blood drops spattered the ledge, leading diagonally across it toward the sheer wall, which showed a great deal of weathering at that point. And Gordon saw something else, the blurred but unmistakable print of bloody fingers on the rock of the wall. He studied the cracks in the rocks for a few minutes, then laid his hand on the wall over the bloody fingerprints and shoved. Instantly, smoothly, a section of the wall swung inward, and he was staring into the door of a narrow tunnel, dimly lit by the moon somewhere behind it. Wary as a stalking panther, he stepped into it, and immediately heard a startled yelp from Yar Ali Khan, to whose inadequate view it had seemed that he had simply melted into the solid rock. Gordon emerged head and shoulders to objurgate his astounded follower to silence, and then continued his investigation. The tunnel was short, and moonlight poured into it from the other end where it opened into a cleft. The moonlight slanted down from above into this cleft, which ran straight for 100 feet and then made an abrupt bend, blocking further view. It was like a knife cut through a block of solid rock. The door through which he had entered was an irregularly shaped slab of rock, hung on heavy, oiled iron hinges. It fit perfectly into its aperture, and its irregular shape made the cracks appear to be merely seams in the cliff, produced by time and erosion. A rope ladder made of heavy rawhide was coiled on a small rock shelf just inside the tunnel mouth, and with this, Gordon returned to the ledge outside. He drew up his rope and coiled it, then made fast the ladder and let it down, and Yar Ali Khan swarmed up it in a frenzy of impatience to be at his friend's side again. He swore softly as he comprehended the mystery of the vanishing trail. But why was not the door bolted on the inside, Sahib? Probably men are coming and going constantly. Men outside might need to get through this door mighty bad, without having to yell for somebody to come and let them in. There wasn't a chance in 1,000 of it ever being discovered. I wouldn't have found it if it hadn't been for the blood marks. At that, I was just playing a hunch when I pushed on the rock. Yar Ali Khan was for plunging instantly into the cleft, but Gordon had become wary. He had not seen or heard anything that would indicate the presence of a sentry, but he did not believe that a people who showed so much ingenuity in concealing the entrance to their country would leave it unguarded, however slight might be the chance of discovery. He hauled up the rawhide ladder, coiled it back on the shelf and closed the door, cutting off the circulation of the moonlight and plunging that end of the tunnel into darkness, in which he commanded Yar Ali Khan to wait for him. The Afridi cursed under his breath, but Gordon believed that one man could reconnoiter beyond that cryptic bend better than two. Yar Ali Khan squatted in the darkness by the door, hugging his rifle and muttering anathema, while Gordon went down the tunnel and into the cleft. This was simply a narrow split in the great solid mass of the cliffs, and an irregular knife edge of starlit sky was visible, hundreds of feet overhead. Enough moonlight found its way into the crevice to make it light enough for Gordon's cat-like eyes. He had not reached the bend when a scruffing of feet beyond it reached him. He had scarcely concealed himself behind a broken outcropping of rock that was split away from the side wall when the sentry came. He came leisurely, and in the manner of one who performs a routine task perfunctorily, secure in his conviction of the inaccessibility of his retreat. He was a squat Mongol with a face like a copper mask, and altogether his appearance was not unlike those of the devils of hill country legends, as he swung along with the wide roll of a horseman, trailing a rifle. He was passing Gordon's hiding place when some obscure instinct brought him about in a flash, teeth bared in a startled snarl, rifle jumping for a shot from the hip. But even as he turned, Gordon was on his feet with the instant uncoiling of steel spring muscles, and as the rifle muzzle leaped to a level, the scimitar lashed down. The Mongol dropped like an ox, his round skull split like a ripe melon. Gordon froze into statuesque immobility, glaring along the passage. As he heard no sound to indicate the presence of any other guard, he risked a low whistle which brought Yar Ali Khan headlong into the cleft, eyes blazing. He grunted expressively at the sight of the dead man. Yes, another son of Erlich, no telling how many more may be in this defile, will drag him behind these rocks where I hid. Good. Come on now. If there were any more close by, they'd have heard the sound of the blow. Gordon was correct. Beyond the bend, the long, deep defile ran empty to the next kink. As they advanced without opposition, belief that the Mongol had been the only sentry posted in the cleft became certainty. The moonlight in the narrow gash above them was paling when they emerged into the open at last. Here the defile broke into a chaos of shattered rock, and the single gorge became half a dozen, threading between isolated crags and split-off rocks like the many mouths of a river that splits into separate streams at the delta. Crumbling pinnacles and turrets of black stone stood up like gaunt ghosts in the gray light which betrayed the coming of dawn. Threading their way between these grim sentinels, they presently looked out upon a level, rock-strewn floor that stretched for 300 yards to the foot of an abrupt cliff. The trail they had been following, grooved by many feet in the weathered stone, crossed the level and twisted a tortuous way up the cliff on ramps cut in the rock. But what lay on top of the cliffs they could not guess. To right and left the solid wall veered away, flanked by the broken pinnacles. What now, Sahib? In the gray light, the Afridi looked like a mountain goblin surprised out of his crag cave by dawn. I think we must be close to listen. Over the cliffs rolled the blaring reverberation they had heard the night before, but now much nearer the strident roar of the giant trumpet. How have we been seen? Wondered Yar Ali Khan, working his rifle bolt. That's on the lap of Allah, but we must see, and we can't climb that cliff without first knowing what lies above it. Here, this will serve our purpose. It was a weathered crag which rose like a tower among its lesser fellows. Any hill-bred child could have scaled it. The comrades went up it almost as swiftly as if it had been a stairway, being careful to keep its bulk between them and the opposite cliffs, until they reached the summit, which was higher than the cliffs. Then they lay behind a spur of rock, staring through the rosy haze of the rising dawn. Allah, swore Yar Ali Khan, reaching for the rifle slung on his back. Seen from their vantage point, the opposite cliffs assumed their real nature as one side of a gigantic mesa-like block, which reminded Gordon of the formations of his native southwest. It rose sheer from the surrounding level, 400 to 500 feet in height, and its perpendicular sides seemed unscalable, except at the point where the trail had been laboriously cut into the stone. East, north, and west, it was girdled by crumbling crags, separated from the plateau by the level canyon floor which varied in width from 300 yards to half a mile. On the south, the plateau abutted on a gigantic, bare mountain whose gaunt peaks dominated the surrounding pinnacles. But the watchers devoted only a glance to the geographical formation, mechanically analyzing and appreciating it. It was a stupefying phenomenon of another nature, which gripped their whole attention. Gordon had not been sure just what he expected to find at the end of the bloody trail. He had anticipated a rendezvous of some sort, certainly. A cluster of horsehide tents, a cavern, perhaps even a village of mud and stone nestling on a hillside. But they were looking at a city whose domes and towers glistened in the rosy dawn, like a magic city of sorcerers stolen from some fabled land and set down in this desert spot. The city of the jinn, ejaculated Yar Ali Khan, jolted back into his original conception of their enemies. Allah is my protection against Shaitan the damned. He snapped his fingers in a gesture older than Mohammed. The plateau was roughly oval in shape, about 1.5 miles in length from north to south, somewhat less than 1 mile in width from east to west. The city stood near the southern extremity, etched against the dark mountain behind it, its flat-topped stone houses and clustering trees dominated by a large edifice whose purple dome gleamed in the sharp dawn, shot and veined with gold. Enchantment and necromancy, exclaimed Yar Ali Khan, completely upset. Gordon did not reply, but the Celtic blood in his veins responded to the somber aspect of the scene, the contrast of the gloomy black crags with the masses of green and the sheens of color which were the city. But the city itself woke forebodings of evil. The gleam of its purple, gold-traced dome was sinister. The black, crumbling crags were a fit setting for it. It was like a city of ancient, demoniac mystery, rising amidst ruin and decay, even its splendor and evil glitter. "This must be the stronghold of the Hidden Ones," muttered Gordon. "I would have expected to find their headquarters concealed in the native district of some city like Delhi or Bombay. But this is a logical point. From here they can strike at all the countries of Western Asia and have a safe hideout to retire to. But who'd have expected to find a city like that in a country so long supposed to be practically uninhabited?" "Not even we can fight a whole city," grunted Yar Ali Khan. Gordon fell silent while he studied the distant view. The city did not show to be so large as it had appeared at first glance. It was compact but unwalled. The houses, 2 or 3 stories in height, stood among clusters of trees and surprising gardens, surprising because the plateau seemed almost solid rock. Gordon reached a decision. "Ali, go back to our camp in the Gorge of Ghosts. Take the horses and ride for Kor. Tell Baber Khan what's happened and say to him that I need him and all his swords. Bring the Ghilzai through the cleft and halt them among these defiles until you get a signal from me, or know I'm dead. Here's a chance to sever 2 necks with the same stroke. If Baber Khan wipes out this nest of vipers, the Emir will pardon him. Shaitan devour Baber Khan, what of thee? I'm going into that city." "Wallah," swore the Afridi. "I've got to. The Yazidis have gone there and Lal Singh must be with them. They may kill him before the Ghilzai could get here. I've got to get him away before we can lay any plans about attacking the city. If you start now, you can get to Kor shortly after nightfall. If you start back from Kor immediately, you should arrive at this spot shortly after sunup. If I'm alive and at liberty, I'll meet you here. If I don't, you and Baber Khan use your own judgment." Yar Ali Khan immediately found objections. "Baber Khan has no love for me. If I go to him alone, he will spit in my beard, and I will kill him, and then his dogs will kill me. He'll do no such thing, and you know it. He will not come. He'd come through hell if I sent for him. His men will not follow him. They fear devils. They'll come fast enough when you tell them it's men who haunt Gulistan. But the horses will be gone. The devils will have stolen them. I doubt it. Nobody else left the city since we took the trail, and no one has come in behind us. Anyway, you can make it to Kor on foot if necessary, though of course it'll take longer." Then Yar Ali Khan tore his beard in wrath and voiced his real objection to leaving Gordon. "The swine in that city will flay you alive. Nay, I will match guile with guile. I'll be a fugitive from the wrath of the Emir, an outlaw seeking sanctuary. The East is full of lies about me. They'll aid me now." Yar Ali Khan abandoned the argument suddenly, realizing the uselessness of it. Grumbling in his beard, wagging his turbaned head direfully, the Afridi clambered down the crag and vanished in the defile without a backward look. When he was out of sight, Gordon also descended and went toward the cliffs. Chapter 3. The Hidden Ones. Gordon expected, at each step, to be fired at from the cliffs, although he had seen no sentinels among the rocks at their crest when he looked from the crag. But he crossed the canyon, reached the foot of the cliff, and began mounting the steep road, still flecked here and there with red drops, without having sighted any human being. The trail wound interminably up a succession of ramps, with low, heavy walls on the outer edge. He had time to admire the engineering ability which made that road possible. Obviously, it was no work of Afghan hillmen. It looked ancient, strong as the mountain itself. For the last 30 feet, the ramps gave way to a flight of steep steps cut into the rock. Still no one challenged him, and he came out on the plateau among a cluster of boulders, from behind which 7 men who had been squatting over a game sprang to their feet and glared wildly at him. They were Kurds, lean, hard-bodied warriors with hawk-beak noses, their slim waists girdled with cartridge belts, and with rifles in their hands. Those rifles were instantly leveled at him. Gordon displayed neither surprise nor perturbation. He set his rifle butt on the ground and eyed the startled Kurds tranquilly. These cutthroats were as uncertain as cornered wildcats, and therefore equally dangerous and unpredictable. His life hung on the crook of a nervous trigger finger, but for the moment they merely glared, struck dumb by his unexpected materialization. "El Borak," muttered the taller of the Kurds, his eyes blazing with fear and suspicion and murder-lust. "What do you hear?" Gordon ran his eyes leisurely over them all before he replied. An easy, relaxed figure standing carelessly before those 7 tense shapes. "I seek your master," he replied presently. This did not seem to reassure them. They began to mutter among themselves, never relaxing the vigilance of eye or trigger finger. The taller Kurd's voice rose irascibly, dominating the others. "You chatter like crows. This thing is plain. We were gambling and did not see him come. Our duty is to watch the stair. We have failed in our duty. If it is known, there will be punishment. Let us slay him and throw him over the cliff." "Aye," agreed Gordon equably. "Do so, and when your master asks, 'Where is El Borak who brought me important news?' say to him, 'Lo, you did not consult with us concerning this man, and so we slew him to teach you a lesson.'" They winced at the biting irony of his words and tone. "None will ever know," growled one. "Shoot him." Nay, the shot would be heard, and there would be questions to answer. "Cut his throat," suggested the youngest of the band, and was scowled at so murderously by his fellows that he fell back in confusion. "I cut my throat," taunted Gordon, laughing at them. "One of you might survive to tell of it." This was no mere bombast, as most of them knew, and they betrayed their uneasiness in their black scowls. "Knives are silent," muttered the youngster, trying to justify himself. He was rewarded by receiving a rifle butt driven angrily into his belly, which made him salaam involuntarily, and then lift up his voice in gasping lamentation. "Son of a dog, would you have us fight El Borak's guns with naked steel?" Having vented some of their spleen on their tactless comrade, the Kurds grew calmer, and the taller man inquired uncertainly of Gordon, "You are expected." "Would I come here if I were not expected? Does the lamb thrust his head unbidden into the jaws of the wolf?" "Lamb," the Kurds cackled sardonically. You a lamb? Ha, Allah! Say rather, does the grey wolf with blood on his fangs seek the hunter? If there is fresh spilt blood, it is but the blood of fools who disobeyed their master's orders, retorted Gordon. Last night in the Gorge of Ghosts, ya Allah, was it you the Yezidi fools fought? They knew you not. They said they had slain an Englishman and his servants in the gorge. So that was why the sentries were so careless. For some reason, the Yezidis had lied about the outcome of that battle, and the watchers of the road were not expecting any pursuit. None of you was among those who, in their ignorance, fell upon me in the gorge. Do we limp? Do we bleed? Do we weep from weariness and wounds? Nay, we have not fought Borak. Then be wise and do not make the mistake they made. Will you take me to him who awaits me, or will you cast dung in his beard by scorning his orders? Allah forbid, ejaculated the tall Kurd. No order had been given us concerning you. Nay, Borak, your heart is full of guile as a serpent's. But if this be a lie, our master shall see your death, and if it be not a lie, then we can have no blame. Give up your rifle and scimitar, and we will conduct you to him. Gordon surrendered the weapons, secure in the knowledge of the big pistol reposing in its shoulder, scabbard under his left arm. The leader then picked up the rifle dropped by the young Kurd, who was still bent double and groaning heartily, straightened him with a resounding kick in the rump, shoved the rifle in his hands and bade him watch the stair as if his life depended on it, then turned, barking orders to the others. As they closed around the seemingly unarmed American, Gordon knew their hands itched to thrust a knife in his back, but he had sown the seeds of fear and uncertainty in their primitive minds, and he knew they dared not strike. They moved out of the clustering boulders and started along the wide road that led to the city. That road had once been paved, and in some places the paving was still in fair condition. The Yazidis passed into the city just before dawn, he asked casually. "Aye," was the terse reply. "They couldn't march fast," mused Gordon. "They had wounded men to carry, and then the Sikh, their prisoner, would be stubborn. They'd have to beat and prod and drag him." One of the men turned his head and began. "Why, the Sikh?" The tall leader barked him to silence and turned on Gordon a baleful gaze. "Do not answer his questions, ask him none. If he mocks us, retort not. A serpent is less crafty. If we talk to him, he will have us bewitched before we reach Shalazar." So that was the name of that fantastic city. Gordon seemed to remember the name in some medieval historical connection. "Why do you mistrust me?" he demanded. "Have I not come to you with open hands?" "I," the Kurd laughed mirthlessly. "Once I saw you come to the Turkish masters of Bitlis with open hands, but when you closed those hands the streets ran red. Nay, Borak, I know you of old, from the days when you led your outlaws through the hills of Kurdistan. I cannot match my wits against yours, but I can keep my tongue between my teeth. You shall not snare me and blind me with cunning words. I will not speak, and if any of my men answer you, I will break his head with my rifle butt." "I thought I recognized you," said Gordon. "You are Yusuf ibn Sulayman. You were a good fighter." The Kurd's scarred face lighted at the praise, and he started to speak, then recollected himself, scowled ferociously, swore at one of his men who had not offended in any way, squared his shoulders uncompromisingly, and strode stiffly ahead of the party. Gordon did not stride. Rather, he strolled, with the air of a man walking amidst an escort of honor, rather than a guard, and his bearing had its effect on the warriors. By the time they reached the city, they were shouldering their rifles instead of carrying them at the ready, and allowing a respectful interval between themselves and him. As they approached Shalazar, the secret of the groves and gardens became apparent. Soil, doubtless brought laboriously from distant valleys, had been used to fill some of the many depressions which pitted the surface of the plateau, and an elaborate system of deep, narrow irrigation canals threaded the gardens, obviously originating in some natural water supply near the center of the city. The plateau, sheltered by the ring of crumbling peaks, presented a more seasonal climate than was common in those mountains. The road ran between large orchards and entered the city proper lines of flat-roofed stone houses fronting each other across the wide, paved street, each with an expanse of garden behind it. There was no wall about the city. The plateau itself was a fortress. Half a mile of ravine-gashed plain separated the city from the mountain which frowned above and behind it. The plateau was like a great shelf jutting out from the massive slope. Men at work in the gardens and loitering along the street halted and stared at the Kurds and their captive. Gordon saw Druzes, many Persians, Arabs, a few Indians, but no Afghans. Evidently, the heterogeneous population had no affiliations with the native inhabitants of the land. The people did not carry their curiosity beyond questioning stares. The street widened into a suck closed on the south side by a broad wall, which enclosed the palatial building with its gorgeous dome. There was no guard at the massive bronze-barred gates, only a gay-clad black man who salaamed deeply as he swung open the portals. Gordon and his escort came into a small courtyard paved with colored tile, in the midst of which a fountain bubbled and pigeons fluttered about it. The Kurds marched straight on across the court, and were halted on the broad pillared portico by a guard of 30 Arabs whose plumed helmets of silvered steel, gilded corselets and gold-chased scimitars contrasted curiously with the modern rifles in their hands. The hawk-faced captain of the guard conversed briefly with Yusuf ibn Sulayman, and Gordon divined that no love was lost between them. The captain, whose name was Mohammed ibn Ahmed, presently made a gesture with his slim brown hand, and Gordon was surrounded by a dozen glittering Arabs, and marched among them up the broad marble steps, and through the wide arch whose bronze doors stood wide. The Kurds followed, without their rifles, and not looking at all happy. They passed through wide, dim-lit halls, from the vaulted and fretted ceilings of which hung smoking bronze censers, while on either hand velvet-curtained arches hinted at inner mysteries. Tapestries rustled, soft footfalls whispered, and once Gordon saw a slim white hand grasping a hanging as if the owner peered from behind it. Even the swagger of the Arabs, all except their captain, was modified. The Kurds were openly uneasy. Mystery and intangible menace lurked in those dim, gorgeous halls. Gordon felt that he might have been traversing a palace of Nineveh or ancient Persia, but for the modern weapons of his escort. Presently they emerged into a broader hallway and approached a double-valved bronze door, flanked by even more gorgeously clad guardsmen, Persians, these, scented and painted like the warriors of Cambyses. These bizarre figures stood impassively as statues while the Arabs strode by with their captive or guest, and entered a semicircular room where dragon-worked tapestries covered the walls, hiding all possible doors or windows except the one by which they had entered. Golden lamps hung from the arched ceiling, which was worked in fretted gold and ebony. Opposite the great doorway there stood a marble dais. On the dais stood a great canopied chair, scrolled and carved like a throne, and on the velvet cushions which littered the seat lolled a slender figure in a pearl-sewn khalat. On the rose-colored turban glistened a great gold brooch, made in the shape of a human hand gripping a three-bladed dagger. The face beneath the turban was oval, the color of old ivory, with a small pointed black beard. The dark eyes were contemplative. The man was a Persian. On either side of the throne stood a giant Sudanese, like images of heathen gods carved out of black basalt, naked but for sandals and silken loincloths, with broad-tipped tulwars in their hands. "Who is this?" languidly inquired the man on the throne in Arabic. "El Borak, Yasidna," answered Mohammed ibn Ahmed, with a swagger in his consciousness that the announcement of that name would create something of a sensation anywhere east of Stamboul. The dark eyes quickened with interest, sharpened with suspicion, and Yusuf ibn Sulayman, watching his master's face with painful intensity, drew in a quick breath and clenched his hands so the nails bit into the palms. How comes he in Shalazar unannounced? The Kurdish dogs who watch the stair say he came to them, swearing that he had been sent for by the Sheikh Ez-Zurim. Gordon stiffened as he heard that title. It was incredible, fantastic, yet it was true. His black eyes fixed with fierce intensity on the oval face. He did not speak. There was a time for silence as well as for bold speech. His next move depended entirely on the Sheikh's next words. They might brand him as an impostor and doom him. But he depended on two things: the belief that no Eastern ruler would order El Borak slain without first trying to learn the reason behind his presence, and the fact that few Eastern rulers either enjoy the full confidence of their followers or themselves wholly trust those followers. After a pause, the man on the throne spoke but not to, the Kurd. "This is the law of Shalazar. No man may ascend the stair unless he makes the sign so the watchers of the stair can see. If he does not know the sign, the warder of the gate must be summoned to converse with the stranger before he may mount the stair." El Borak was not announced. The warder of the gate was not summoned. Did El Borak make the sign below the stair? Yusuf ibn Sulayman sweated as he wavered between a dangerous truth and a lie that might be even more dangerous. He shot a venomous glance at Gordon and spoke in a voice harsh with apprehension. "The guard in the cleft did not give warning. El Borak appeared upon the cliff before we saw him, though we were vigilant as eagles. He is a magician who makes himself invisible at will. We knew he spoke truth when he said you had sent for him. Otherwise he could not have known the secret way." Perspiration beaded the Kurd's narrow forehead. The man on the throne did not seem to hear his voice, and Mohammed ibn Ahmed, quick to sense that the Kurd had fallen in disfavor, struck Yusuf savagely in the mouth with his open hand. "Dog, be silent until the Sheikh deigns to command thy speech." Yusuf reeled, blood starting down his beard, and looked black murder at the Arab, but he said nothing. The Persian moved his hand languidly, yet with impatience. "Take the Kurds away. Keep them under guard until further orders. Even if a man is expected, the watchers should not be surprised." Borak did not know the sign, yet he climbed the stair unhindered. If they had been vigilant, not even Borak could have done this. "He is no magician. You have my leave to go. I will talk to Borak alone." Mohammed ibn Ahmed salaamed and led his glittering swordsmen away between the silent files of warriors lined on each side of the door, herding the shivering Kurds before them. These turned as they passed through the door and fixed their burning eyes on Gordon in a silent glare of hate. Mohammed ibn Ahmed pulled the bronze doors shut behind them. The Persian spoke in English to Gordon. "Speak freely. These black men do not understand English." Gordon, before replying, kicked a divan up before the dais and settled himself comfortably on it, with his feet propped on a velvet footstool. He had not established his prestige in the Orient by meek bearing or timid behavior. Where another man might have tiptoed, hat in hand and heart in mouth, Gordon strode with heavy boots and heavy hand, and because he was Borak, he lived where other men died. His attitude was no bluff. He was ready at all times to back up his play with hot lead and cold steel, and men knew it, just as they knew that he was the most dangerous man with any sort of weapon between Cairo and Peking. The Persian showed no surprise that his captive or guest should seat himself without asking permission. His first words showed that he had had much dealings with Westerners, and had, for his own purposes, adopted some of their directness. For he said, without preamble, "I did not send for you." "Of course not, but I had to tell those fools something or else kill them all." "What do you want here?" "What does any man want who comes to a nest of outlaws?" "He might come as a spy," pointed out the sheikh. Gordon laughed at him. "For whom?" "How did you know the road?" Gordon took refuge in the obscurity of Eastern subtlety. "I followed the vultures. They always lead me to my goal." "They should," was the grim reply. "You have fed them full often enough. What of the Mongol who watched the cleft?" "Dead. He wouldn't listen to reason." "The vultures follow you, not you the vultures," commented the sheikh. "Why did you not send word to me of your coming?" "Send word by whom?" "Last night as I camped in the Gorge of Ghosts, resting my horses before I pushed on to Shalazar, a gang of your fools fell on my party in the darkness, killed one and carried another away. The fourth man was frightened and ran away. I came on alone as soon as the moon rose. They were Yazidis, whose duty it is to watch the Gorge of Ghosts. They did not know you sought me. They limped into the city at dawn, with one man dying and most of the others sorely wounded, and swore that they had slain a sahib and his servants in the Gorge of Ghosts. Evidently, they feared to admit that they ran away, leaving you alive. They shall smart for their lie, but you have not told me why you came here." "I seek refuge, and I bring news. The man you sent to kill the emir wounded him and was himself cut to pieces by the Uzbek guardsmen." The Persian shrugged his shoulders impatiently. "Your news is stale. We knew that before the noon of the day after the night the execution was attempted, and we have since learned that the Emir will live, because an English physician cleansed the wounds of the poison which was on the dagger. That sounded like black magic, until Gordon remembered the pigeons in the courtyard. Carrier birds, of course, and agents in Kabul to release them with the messages. "We have kept our secret well," said the Persian. "Since you knew of Shalazar and the road to Shalazar, you must have been told of it by someone of the Brotherhood. Did Baghila send you?" Gordon recognized the trap laid for him and avoided it. He had no idea who Baghila was, and this question was too obviously a bait an impostor might be tempted to seize. "I don't know the man you call Baghila," he answered. "I don't have to be told secrets. I learned them for myself. I came here because I had to have a hideout. I'm out of favor at Kabul, and the English would have me shot if they could catch me." One of the most persistent legends in circulation about Gordon is that he is an enemy of the English. This has its basis in his refusal to be awed by gold braid and brass buttons, and in his comings and goings in tranquil disregard of all rules and regulations. He has no reverence for authority which bedecks itself in pomp and arrogance, and as a result is hated by certain types of officials, both civilian and military. But the men who actually rule India are his friends, and have profited by his aid again and again. But the Persian had no way of knowing this. To the Sheikh, Borak was merely a lawless adventurer, not quite gone native, but still beyond the pale of respectability, and quite likely to fall foul of the government at any time. He said something in scholarly and archaic Persian, and Gordon, knowing he would not change the language of their conversation without a subtle reason, feigned ignorance of the tongue. Sometimes Oriental deviousness is childishly transparent. The Sheikh spoke to one of the blacks, and that giant stolidly drew a silver hammer from his girdle and smote a golden gong hanging by the tapestries. The echoes had scarcely died away when the bronze doors opened long enough to admit a slim man in plain silken robes who stood bowing before the dais, a Persian, like the Sheikh. The latter addressed him as Musa and questioned him in the tongue he had just tested on Gordon. Musa replied in the same language. "Do you know this man?" "I Yasidno." "Have our spies included him in their reports?" "I Yasidna. The last dispatch from Kabul bore word of him. On the night that your servant attempted to execute the Emir, this man talked with the Emir secretly, an hour or so before the attack was made. After leaving the palace hurriedly, he fled from the city with 3 men and was seen riding along the road that leads to the village of the outlaw Baber Khan of Kor. He was pursued by a horseman from Kabul, but whether he gave up the chase or was slain by the men of Kor, I do not know." Gordon, lounging on the divan and showing no sign to betray his understanding of what was being said, realized 2 things. The spy system of the Hidden Ones was more far-reaching than he had guessed, and a chain of misinterpreted circumstances were working in his favor. It was natural for these men to think that he had fled from Kabul under the shadow of royal displeasure. That he should ride for the village of an outlaw would seem to clinch the matter, as well as the fact of his pursuit by a horseman from Kabul, obviously not recognized as Lal Singh. You have my leave to go." Musa bowed and departed, closing the doors, and the sheikh meditated in silence for a space. Presently, he lifted his head as if coming to a decision and said, "I believe you are telling the truth. You fled from Kabul to Kor, where no friend of the emir would be welcome. Your enmity toward the English is well known. We need such a man as you. But I cannot initiate you into the brotherhood until Baghila sees and passes on you. He is not now in Shalazar, but will be here by tomorrow dawn. In the meantime, I would like to know how you learned of our society and of our city." Gordon shrugged his shoulders. "I hear the secrets the wind sings as it blows through the branches of the dry tamarisks, and the tales the men of the caravans whisper about the dung fires in the sarais. Then you know our purpose, our ambition. I know what you call yourselves." Gordon's answer was purposely ambiguous, for he was groping his way, guided more by intuition and guesswork than by actual knowledge. His sole means of identification of the cult with which he was dealing was the title the Arab had given the Persian, the title of the lord of an ancient and mysterious race. That race and that title had once existed, beyond the shadow of a doubt, but both were clouded by the legends and myths of many centuries. "Do you know what my title means?" asked the sheikh suddenly, as if guessing Gordon's thoughts. "Sheikh Ez Zurim, Lord of the Zurim," answered Gordon. The Zurim were a pre-Canaanitish race who lived in Syria before the coming of the Semitic tribes. They were given to heathenish worship and practiced all kinds of black magic and human sacrifice. The Israelites destroyed the last remnants of them. "So say the historians," sneered the sheikh. "But the descendants of the Zurim still dwell in the mountains of Syria." "I suspected as much," said Gordon. "Their practices persisted in a devil-worshipping cult of the same name. I've heard tales of it, but until recently I set them all down as legends." "Aye," exclaimed the Persian. "The world deems them legends, but since the beginning of happenings, the fire of Zurim has not been wholly extinguished, though for more than a century it smoldered to glowing coals. I've always suspected the existence of cults in the East that reach back before the time of Mohammed," said Gordon slowly. "You speak the truth. And the Society of the Hidden Ones is the oldest of all. It lies behind and beyond Islam, Buddha, or Brahma. It recognizes no difference in race or religion. In the ancient past, its branches extended all over the East, from Mongolia to Egypt. Mohammed thought he had destroyed the cult in Arabia, but he only broke one of its branches. Men of many races belong, and have belonged, to the Society of the Hidden Ones. In the long ago the Zurim were only one branch, though from their race the priests of the cult were chosen. In later days the assassins of Mount Alamat were a branch of the Hidden Ones, as were the Druzes who worshipped the gold calf, the Yazidis of Mount Lalish, and the Mongol sons of Yellow Erlik. In Egypt, Syria, Persia, and India were bands of the cult, cloaked in mystery and only half suspected by the races among which they dwelt. But as the centuries passed, these groups became isolated and fell apart, each branch going its separate way, and each dwindling in strength and importance because of a lack of unity. In olden days, the Hidden Ones swayed the destinies of empires. They did not lead armies in the field, but they fought by poison and fire, and the triple-bladed dagger that bit in the dark. Their scarlet-cloaked emissaries of death went forth to do the bidding of the Sheikh Ez-Zurim, and kings died in Cairo, in Jerusalem, in Samarkand, in Brusa. And I am a descendant of that one who was Sheikh Ez-Zurim in the days of Saladin, he who was the unseen, unguessed master of Hassan ibn Sabah, the old man of the mountain. All Asia feared the Sheikh al-Jebel, but he only did the bidding of the Sheikh Ez-Zurim. A fanatical gleam lit the dark eyes. Throughout my youth I dreamed of the former greatness of the cult, into which I was initiated when I was but a child. Wealth that flowed suddenly from the barren lands of my estate, Western money that came to me from minerals found there, made the dream become reality. Othman el-Aziz became Sheikh Ez-Zurim, the first to hold the title in 100 years. The creed of the Hidden Ones is broad and deep as the sea, ignoring racial and religious differences, uniting men of opposing sects. Strand by strand I drew together and united the separate branches of the cult. My emissaries traveled throughout Asia, seeking members of the ancient society and finding them in teeming cities, among barren mountains, in the silence of upland deserts. Slowly, surely, my band has grown, for I have not only united all the various branches of the cult, but have gained new recruits among the bold and desperate spirits of a score of races. All are one before the fire of Zurim. I have among my followers Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, devil worshippers. 4 years ago I came with my followers to this city, then a crumbling mass of ruins, unknown to the hillmen because their superstitious legends made them shun this region. Centuries ago it was a city of the assassins and was laid waste by the Mongols. When I came, the buildings were crumbled stone, the canals filled with rubble, the groves grown wild and tangled. It took 3 years to rebuild it, and most of my fortune went into the labor, for bringing material here secretly was tedious and dangerous work. We brought it out of Persia, over the old caravan route from the west, and up an ancient ramp on the western side of the plateau, which I have since destroyed. But at last I looked upon forgotten Shalazar as it was in the days of the ancient sheikhs. It does no harm for you to know these secrets. If Baghila does not approve of you, your knowledge will die with you. If he does, then you have learned no more than you will learn in any event as a hidden one. You can rise high in the empire I am building. 3 years I was preparing. Then I began to strike. Within the last year my Fedrois have gone forth with poisoned daggers as they went forth in the old days, knowing no law but my will, incorruptible, invincible. And your ultimate ambition. Have you not guessed it? The Persian almost whispered it, his eyes wide and blank with his strange fanaticism. Who would, but I'd rather hear it from your lips. I will rule all Asia. I will control the destinies of the world. Kings on their thrones will be but puppets dancing on my strings. Those who dare disobey my commands shall die. Soon none will dare disobey. All power will be mine. Power, Allah, what is greater under paradise? Gordon did not reply. He was comparing the Sheikh's repeated references to his absolute power with his remarks concerning the mysterious Baghila who must decide Gordon's status. This seemed to indicate that Othman's authority was not supreme in Shalazar after all. Gordon wondered who Baghila was. The term meant panther, and was probably a title like his own native name of El Borak. "Where is the Sikh Lal Singh?" he demanded abruptly. "Your Yazidis carried him away, after they murdered Ahmed Shah." Othman's expression of surprise was overdone. "I do not know to whom you refer. The Yazidis brought back no captive with them from the Gorge of Ghosts." Gordon knew he was lying, but also realized that it would be useless to push his questioning further at that time. He could not imagine why Othman should deny knowledge of the Sikh, whom he was sure had been brought into the city, but it might be dangerous to press the matter after a formal denial by the Persian. The sheikh motioned to the black, who again smote the gong, and again Musa entered, salaaming. "Musa will show you to a chamber where food and drink will be brought to you," he said. "You are not a prisoner, of course. No guard will be placed over you, but I must ask you not to leave your chamber until I send for you. My men are suspicious of Feringhi, and until you are formally initiated into the society." There was no need to finish the sentence. Chapter 4. Whispering Swords. The impassive Musa conducted Gordon through the bronze doors, past the files of glittering guardsmen, and along a narrow, winding corridor which branched off from the broad hallway. Some distance from the audience chamber, he led Gordon into a chamber with a domed ceiling of ivory and sandalwood, and one heavy, brass-bound mahogany door. There were no windows. Air and light circulated through concealed apertures in the dome. The walls were hung with rich tapestries, the floor hidden by cushion-strewn rugs. Musa bowed himself out without a word, shutting the door behind him, and Gordon seated himself on a velvet divan. This was the most bizarre situation he had ever found himself in, during the course of a life packed with wild adventures and bloody episodes. He felt out of place in his boots and dusty khakis, in this mysterious city that turned the clock of time back nearly 1,000 years. There was a curious sensation of having strayed out of his own age into a lost and forgotten past. He shook himself impatiently. This affair was no ordinary revival of an ancient mystic cult. The Sheikh Ez-Zurim might rule supreme in Shalazar, where sleeping ages woke in immemorial life. But Gordon sensed something behind this. A dim, gigantic shadow looming behind these veils of mystery and intrigue. What was the prize for which the great nations of the world sparred behind locked doors? India, the golden key to Asia. Something more than the mad whim of a Persian dreamer lay behind this fantastic plot. He questioned Othman's assertion that he had rebuilt the city out of his own private fortune. He doubted if any Persian fortune would have proved adequate for the obviously stupendous expenditure. The rebuilding of Shalazar indicated powerful backing, with unlimited resources. Then Gordon forgot all other angles of the adventure in concern over the fate of Lal Singh. Impassive in contemplating his own peril and the destinies of nations, he rose and paced the floor like a caged tiger as he brooded over the mystery of the Sikh's disappearance. Othman's denial of any knowledge of the prisoner had a sinister suggestion. Gordon seated himself as he heard sandaled feet pad in the corridor, and immediately the door opened, and Musa entered, followed by a huge black man bearing viands in gold dishes and a golden jug of wine. Musa closed the door quickly, but not before Gordon had a glimpse of a helmet spike protruding from the tapestries, which obviously masked an alcove across the corridor. So Othman had lied when he said no guard would be placed to watch him. Gordon considered himself absolved of any implied agreement to remain in the chamber. Wine of Shiraz, Sahib, and food, Musa indicated unnecessarily. Presently a girl beautiful as a houri shall be sent to entertain the Sahib. Gordon started to decline when he realized that the girl would be sent anyhow to spy on him, so he merely nodded. Musa motioned the slave to set down the food, and he himself tasted each dish and sipped liberally of the wine, before bowing himself out of the room, hurting the black man before him. But Gordon, suspicious as a hungry wolf in a trap, emptied the jug behind the divan and ate the food only after his investigations, armed by his years of experience in Oriental intrigues, convinced him that the dishes had not been tampered with. He had scarcely completed the meal when the door opened again, just long enough to admit a slim, supple figure, a girl clad in gold breastplates, jewel-crusted girdle, and filmy silk trousers. She might have stepped out of the harem of Harun-ar-Rashid, but Gordon started to his feet with an exclamation, for he recognized her even before she lifted her filmy yasmak. "Azizun, what are you doing here?" Her dark eyes were dilated with fear and excitement. Her words tumbled over one another, and her fingers fluttered childishly at his hands. "They stole me, Sahib, the hidden ones, one night as I walked in my father's garden in Delhi. By secret, devious ways they brought me to this city of devils, to be a slave with the other girls they steal out of India. They ply their slave trade under the very noses of the British, who suspect nothing." Gordon said nothing, but the red glint in his black eyes was eloquent. He had discovered another reason for destroying this den of snakes. The girl hurried on, stammering in her haste. "I have dwelt here for a month. I have almost died of shame. I have been whipped. I have seen other girls die of torture. Oh, what shame for my father, that his daughter should be made a slave of pagans and devil worshippers. My heart almost burst when I saw you brought in among Mohammed ibn Ahmed's swordsmen. I was watching from a tapestried doorway. While I racked my brain for a way to get word with you, the master of the girls came to send a girl to the Sahib to learn, if possible, whether he were a spy or a true man, and if he possessed any hidden weapon. I prevailed upon the master of the girls to send me. I told him I was your enemy, that you slew my brother." She meditated for a moment over the enormity of the lie. Her brother was one of Gordon's best friends. "Azizun, do you know anything of Lal Singh the Sikh?" "Yes, Sahib. They brought him here captive to make a fedai of him, for no Sikh has yet joined the cult. But Lal Singh is a very powerful man, as the Sahib knows, and after they reached the city and delivered him into the hands of the Arab guards, he broke free and with his bare hands slew the brother of Mohammed ibn Ahmed. Mohammed demanded his head, and he is too powerful even for Othman to refuse in this matter." "So that's why the Sheikh lied about Lal Singh," muttered Gordon. "Yes, Sahib. Lal Singh lies in a dungeon below the palace, and tomorrow he is to be given to the Arab for torture and execution. Gordon's face darkened and became sinister. "Lead me tonight to Mohammed's sleeping quarters," he requested, his narrowing eyes betraying his deadly intention. "Nay, he sleeps among his warriors, all proven swordsmen of the desert, too many even for thee, Prince of Swords. I will lead you to Lao Singh." "What of the guard hidden in the corridor?" "He will not see us go, and he will not open the door or allow anyone else to enter until he has seen me depart." She drew aside the tapestry on the wall opposite the door and pressed on an arabesque design. A panel swung inward, revealing a narrow stair that wound down into lightless depths. "The masters think their slaves do not know their secrets," she muttered. "Come." Producing and lighting a tiny candle, she held it aloft as she led the way onto the stair, closing the panel after them. They descended until Gordon estimated that they were well beneath the palace, and then struck a narrow, level tunnel which ran away from the foot of the stair. "A Rajput who planned to run away from Shalazar showed me this secret way," she said. "I planned to escape with him. We hid food and weapons here. He was caught and tortured but died without betraying me. Here is the sword he hid." She paused and fumbled in a niche, drawing out a blade which she gave to Gordon. A few moments later they reached a heavy, iron-bound door, and Azizun, gesturing for caution, drew Gordon to it and showed him a tiny aperture to peer through. He looked into a corridor flanked by rows of cells with barred doors. Archaic bronze lamps hung at intervals, casting a mellow glow. Some 50 feet away the corridor made an abrupt turn. Before one of the nearer cell doors stood a resplendent Arab in glittering corselet and plumed helmet, scimitar in hand. Azizun's fingers tightened on Gordon's arm. "Lao Singh is in that cell," she whispered. "Do not shoot the Arab, slay him in silence. He has no gun and he is arrogant of his swordsmanship. The ring of steel will not be heard above." Gordon tried the balance of the blade she had given him. A long Indian steel, light but well-nigh unbreakable, and about the same length as the Arab's scimitar. Gordon pushed open the secret door, and as he stepped into the corridor, he saw the face of Lao Singh staring through the bars behind the Arab. The hinges of the hidden door creaked, and the Arab whirled cat-like, snarled and glared wildly, and then came to the attack with the instant decisiveness of a panther. Gordon met him halfway, and the wild-eyed Sikh gripping the bars until his knuckles were bloodless, and the Indian girl crouching in the open doorway witnessed a play of swords that would have burned the blood of kings. The only sounds were the quick, soft, sure shuffle and thud of feet, the slither and rasp of steel on steel, the breathing of the fighters. The long, light blades flickered lethally in the elusive light. They were like living things, like parts of the men who wielded them, welded not only to hand but to brain as well. To the girl it was bewildering and incomprehensible. But Lao Singh appreciated to the fullest the superlative skill which scintillated there in lightning intricacies, and he alternately chilled and burned with the bright splendor of the fray. Even before the Arab, he knew when the hairline balance shifted, sensed the inevitable outcome an instant before the Arab's lip drew back from his teeth in ferocious recognition of defeat and desperate resolve to take his enemy into death with him. But the end came even before Lao Singh realized its imminence. A louder ring of blades, a flash of steel that baffled the eye. Gordon's flickering blade seemed lightly to caress his enemy's neck in passing. And then the Arab was stretched on the floor, his head all but severed from his body. He had died without a cry. Gordon stood over him for an instant, the sword in his hand stained with a thread of crimson. His shirt had been torn open, and his muscular breast rose and fell easily. Only a film of perspiration glistening there, and on his brow betrayed the strain of his recent exertions. He stooped and tore a bunch of keys from the dead man's girdle, and the grate of steel in the lock seemed to awaken Lao Singh from a trance. "Sahib, you are mad to come here, but what a fight, what a fight!" Gordon pulled open the door and the Sikh stepped forth, light and supple as a great panther, and picked up the Arab's sword. At the feel of the hilt he sighed with deep satisfaction. "What now, Sahib?" "We won't have a chance if we make a break before dark," snapped Gordon. "Azizun, how soon will another guard come to relieve the man I killed?" "They change the guard every 4 hours. His watch had just begun." "Good." He glanced at his watch and was surprised to note the hour. He had been in Shalazar much longer than he had realized. "Within 4 hours it will be sundown. As soon as it's dark we'll make a break to get away. Until we're ready, Lao Singh will hide on the secret stair." "But when the guard comes to relieve this one," said the Sikh, "it will be known that I have escaped from my cell. You should have left me here until you were ready to go, Sahib." "I didn't dare risk it. I might not have been able to get you out when the time came. We have 4 hours leeway. When they find you're gone, maybe the confusion will help us. We'll dress this body in your clothes and lay it in the cell, with the face turned away from the door. When the other guard comes, maybe he'll think it's you, asleep or dead, and start looking for the original guard instead of you. The longer it is before they find you've escaped, the more time we'll have." "Nay," exclaimed the Sikh suddenly. "I forgot the other prisoners in a cell beyond the turn in the corridor. They have heard the sound of the fighting and our voices. They will betray us to the guard when he comes. I saw the Arabs hustling them along the passage a few hours ago, 6 villainous Kurds." "Kurds?" Gordon looked up with quickened interest. With a few swift strides he rounded the turn in the corridor and halted, staring at a certain cell. Bearded faces crowded the grill of that cell. Lean hands gripped the bars. Poisonous hate burned in the eyes that mutely beat against him. "You were faithful Fedoys," he said. "Why are you locked in a cell?" Yusuf ibn Sulayman spat toward him. "Melancholy dog thou. The sheikh said we were either knaves or fools to be surprised on the stair as you surprised us. So at dawn we die under the daggers of Mohammed ibn Ahmed's slayers. Allah curse him and you. Yet it must be just, if it be the will of thy master, the Sheikh Ez-Zurim," he reminded them. "May the dogs gnaw the bones of the Sheikh Ez-Zurim," they replied with wholehearted venom, and Gordon decided these men must be new recruits to the cult, lacking the age-old tradition that made most of the hidden ones servile slaves to the head of the order. He weighed in his hand the keys he had taken from the dead guard, and the Kurds looked at them as men in hell look at an open door. "Yusuf ibn Sulayman," he said abruptly, Your hands are stained with many crimes, but not the violation of a sworn oath. The sheikh has betrayed you, cast you from his service. You owe him no allegiance." Yusuf's eyes were those of a wolf. "If I could send him to Jahannam ahead of me," he muttered, "I would die happy." All stared tensely at Gordon, sensing a purpose behind his words. "Will you swear, each man by the honor of his clan, to serve me until vengeance is accomplished, or death releases you from the vow?" he asked, placing the keys behind him so as not to seem to be flaunting them too flagrantly before helpless men. "Othman will give you nothing but the death of a dog. I offer you revenge and a chance to die honorably." Yusuf's eyes blazed in response to a wild surge of hope, and his sinewy hands quivered as they grasped the bars. "Trust us," was all he said, but it spoke volumes. "Aye, we swear," clamored the men behind him. "Hearken, El Borak, we swear." He was already turning the key in the lock. Wild, cruel, treacherous according to Western standards, they had their code of honor, those fierce mountaineers, and it was not so far different from the code of his own Highlander ancestors, but that he could understand it. Tumbling out of the cell, they lifted their hands toward him, palms outward. "Yakawend, we await orders." Motioning them to follow him, he strode back down the corridor to where the dead Arab lay. "Drag the body into that cell, and you, Yusuf ibn Sulayman, put on his garments." The celerity with which they obeyed him modified the suspicion in Lal Singh's dark eyes, and the Sikh relaxed his grip on his scimitar. In a very few moments, Yusuf ibn Sulayman emerged in the plumed helmet, corselet, and silken garments of the Arab, and his features were sufficiently Semitic to deceive anyone who was expecting to encounter an Arab in that garb. "Give him the Arab's scimitar, Lal Singh," commanded Gordon, and the Sikh obeyed readily. "You will play the part of a guard patrolling this corridor," said Gordon. "These others will hide behind yonder secret door. In 4 hours' time one will come to relieve you. He will think you are the man whose garments you wear, and you must kill or capture him before he recognizes you. With Lal Singh and your companions to aid you, it should be easy. That will give us 4 more hours of time in which to plan and effect our escape from Shalazar. I've made no definite plan yet. That will depend on circumstances. Yusuf ibn Sulayman will patrol the corridors in case someone comes before the guard is due to be changed. Lal Singh and the other Kurds will hide in the tunnel. As soon as it is dark, if I'm still alive and at liberty, I'll come to you and we'll make the break somehow. If anything happens to me, the girl Azizun will get the word to you, and you must take her and try to fight your way clear. In case you men make it and I don't, try to get back along the trail and meet the Ghilzai as they come. I sent Yar Ali Khan back after them. He should return with them to the canyon below the plateau sometime tomorrow morning." They listened in silence, nodding, and Gordon gave his pistol and electric torch to Lal Singh, and the Indian saber to one of the Kurds. Then Azizun relighted her candle, and Gordon pulled open the secret door which, when closed, presented the illusion of being part of the blank stone wall, and showed his followers the tunnel behind it. "Here you must hide, ready to aid Yusuf ibn Sulayman when the guard comes. If neither I nor Azizun comes to you within 7 hours, go up the stairs, Open the panel door and escape if you can." "We hearken and obey, Sahib," said Lal Singh. "It is my shame that I was taken unawares, but the Yezidis stole out of the ravine like cats and struck me down with a stone thrown from a sling before I was aware of them. When I regained my senses, I was bound and gagged. In the same way they smote down Ahmed Shah, but him they slew, because the hidden ones have naught to do with the hill folk, fearing such men would talk to their kind, and so betray the secret of Shalazar. The Yezidis are like cats in the dark. Nevertheless, it is a great shame upon me." And so saying, he seated himself cross-legged on the tunnel floor, where the Kurds had already deposited themselves, and settled himself tranquilly for his long vigil. Gordon followed Azizun down the tunnel and up the stair, with his whole chance of success and life itself depending on the word of a savage. There was nothing to keep Yusuf ibn Sulayman from seeking to buy his life from Othman by betraying the American, nothing but the primitive honor of a man who knew he was trusted by another man of honor. Back in the ivory dome chamber, Azizun carefully hung the tapestry over the fake panel, and Gordon said, "You'd better go now. If you stay too long, they may get suspicious. Contrive to return to me here as soon as it's dark. I've got an idea that I'm to remain in this chamber until this fellow Baghila returns. When you come back, tell the guard outside that the Sheikh sent you. If the Sheikh questions you concerning me, tell him I'm a bloody-handed outlaw, eager to join the hidden ones, and that I have no hidden weapons on me." "Yes, Sahib, I will return after dark." The girl was trembling with fear and excitement, but she controlled herself admirably. There was pity in Gordon's black eyes as he watched her slender figure, carried bravely, pass through the door. Then the hard-limbed American stretched himself on the couch. 4 hours at least must pass before he could make any kind of a move. Long ago he had learned to snatch food and sleep when he could. He was playing a game with life and death for stakes. His masquerade hung by a hair. He had as yet no plan for escaping from the city or descending the cliffs afterward. He was gambling that he would be able to find or make a way when the time was ripe. And in the meantime, he slept as tranquilly and soundly as if he lay in the house of a friend, in his native country. Chapter 5. The Mask Falls. Like most men who live by the skin of their teeth, Gordon's slumber, though sound, was light. He awoke the instant a hand touched the door, and he was on his feet, fully alert when Musa entered, with the inevitable salam. He knew he had not slept 4 hours. "The Sheikh Ez-Zurim desires your presence, Sahib. The Lord Baghila has returned ahead of time." So the mysterious panther had returned sooner than the Sheikh had expected. Gordon felt a premonitory tightening of his nerves as he followed the Persian out of the chamber. A backward glance showed a man emerge from the tapestry where he had glimpsed the helmet and fall in behind them. Musa did not lead him back to the chamber where the Sheikh had first received him. He was conducted through a winding corridor to a gilded door before which stood an Arab swordsman. This man opened the door and Musa hurried Gordon across the threshold. The door closed behind them and Gordon halted suddenly. He stood in a broad room without windows, but with several doors. Across the chamber the Sheikh lounged on a divan with his black slaves behind him, and clustered about him were a dozen armed men of various races, including one Oryxi, the first Pathan Gordon had seen in Shalazar, a hairy, ragged, scarred villain whom Gordon knew as Kuruk Khan, a thief and murderer. But the American spared these men only the briefest glance. His eyes were glued on the man who dominated the scene. This man stood between him and the Sheikh's divan, with the wide-legged stance of a horseman handsome in a dark, saturnine way. He was taller than Gordon and more wiry in build, his leanness being emphasized by his close-fitting breeches and riding boots. One hand caressed the butt of the heavy automatic which hung at his thigh, the other stroked his thin black mustache. And Gordon knew the game was up, for this was Ivan Constantine, a Cossack, who knew Borak too well to be deceived as the Sheikh had been. "This is the man," said Othman. "He desires to join us." The man they called Baghila, the panther, smiled thinly. "He has been playing a role. Borak would never turn renegade. He is here as a spy for the English." The eyes fixed on the American grew suddenly murderous. No more than Baghila's word was necessary to convince his followers. They did not understand why the American laughed suddenly. Constantine did not understand. He knew Gordon well enough to know Borak was a foe, not a friend of the hidden ones, but he did not know him well enough to understand that laugh, or the dark flame that rose in the black eyes. Gordon's laughter was not of self-mockery, or of that cynicism which derides its own defeat. It welled from the depths of his elemental soul in the knowledge that all masks were fallen, subtlety and intrigue were done with, and only fighting remained, fighting in which he exulted blindly, unreasoningly, whatever the odds, as his berserk ancestors exulted. But for the moment he held himself hard in check, and his enemies did not recognize the warning that burned in his black eyes. The Sheikh made a gesture of repudiation. "In these matters I defer to your judgment, Baghila. You know the man. I do not. Do what you will. He is unarmed." At the assurance of the helplessness of their prey, wolfish cruelty sharpened the tense faces, and Kuruk Khan half drew a 3-foot Khyber knife from its embroidered scabbard. There was plenty of edged steel in evidence, but the Cossack's gun was the only one in sight. "That will make it easier," laughed Constantine, then slipped into Russian, which the Persian obviously did not understand. "Gordon, you were mad to come here. You should have known you meet someone who knew you as you are, not as these fools think you are." "You were the joker in the deck," admitted Gordon. "I didn't know the natives called you Baghila, but I knew some European power must be behind this masquerade. Somebody's dreaming of an Asiatic empire. So they sent you to combine forces with a fanatic, help him build a city, and make a tool of him. They supplied money and European wits. What do they hope to do? Supplant each Eastern ruler, now friendly to England, with a puppet trained to dance on their string?" "In part," admitted Constantine. "This is but one strand in a far-flung web of imperial plan. I won't bother to remind you that you might have had a part in the coming empire, if you chose. I cannot understand your friendship for the British who rule India. You are an American." Gordon smiled bleakly. "I care nothing for England or English interests, but India is better off under British rule than it would be under men who employ such tools as yourself. By the way, who are your employers now?" The agents of the Tsar or somebody else. That will make little difference to you shortly. Constantine showed his white teeth in a light laugh. Othman and his men were exhibiting uneasiness, irked at being unable to follow the conversation. The Cossack shifted to Arabic. Your finish will be interesting to watch. Men say you are stoical as the Red Indians of your country. I am curious to test that reputation. Bind him, men. His gesture as he reached for the automatic at his hip was leisurely. He knew Gordon was dangerous, but he had never seen the black-haired Westerner in action. He could not realize the savage quickness that had won Borak his name. Before the Cossack could draw his pistol, Gordon sprang and struck as a panther strikes. The impact of his fist was like that of a trip hammer, and Constantine went down, blood spurting from his jaw, the pistol slipping from its holster. Before Gordon could snatch the weapon, Kurak Khan was upon him. Only the Pathan realized Gordon's deadly quickness, and even he had not been swift enough to save the Cossack. But he kept Gordon from securing the pistol, for Borak had to whirl and grapple as the 3-foot Khyber knife rose above him. Gordon caught the knife wrist as it fell, checking the stroke in midair, the iron sinews springing out on his own wrist with the effort. His right hand ripped a curved dagger from the Pathan's girdle and sank it to the hilt under his ribs almost with the same motion. Kurak Khan groaned and sank down dying, and Gordon wrenched away the long knife as he crumpled. All this had happened in a stunning explosion of speed. Constantine was down and Kurak Khan was dying before the others could get into action, and when they did, they were met by a yard of razor-edged steel in the hand of the most terrible knife fighter north of the Khyber. Gordon did not put his back to the wall. He sprang into the thick of his foes, wielding his dripping knife murderously. They swirled about him. He was the center of a whirlwind of blades that flickered and lunged and swiped, yet somehow missed their mark again and again as he shifted his position so swiftly that he baffled both eye and hand. Their numbers hindered them. They cut thin air or gashed one another, confused by his speed and demoralized by his wolfish ferocity. At such close quarters, the long knife was more deadly than saber or tulwar, and Gordon was master of its every use, whether the terrible downward swing that splits a skull or the savage upward rip that spills out a man's entrails. It was butcher's work, but Borak never made a false motion, was never for an instant in doubt or confused. Like a typhoon, he waded through that milling jam of straining bodies and flailing blades, and he left a red wake behind him. The sense of time is lost in the madness of battle. However long it seemed to the combatants, it was only a matter of moments until the melee burst asunder as the survivors gave back, stunned by the havoc wrought among them. And as the press gave way, Gordon cleared a path with a devastating swing of his knife and bounded toward the nearest door, the one on the left of that opening into the hallway. "Stop him!" screamed the sheikh from his place of safety across the room, flanked by his stolid Sudanese. In his fury, he ran across the chamber, shrieking maledictions at his groping, floundering, bemused warriors. They seemed paralyzed by the rapid movements of the American. Gordon reached the door and jerked at it, and his heart fell into his boots. It was bolted on the other side. Clusters of armed men stood between him and the other doors, and now They converged toward him as Othman yelled with gratification and lashed them on. Gordon wheeled, his back to the wall at last, facing death in the onrushing hedge of bristling steel backed by wild faces, but aware of no emotion except a ferocious intent to take a bloody toll among his slayers. The door opened behind him, and he whipped around in a flash and struck at the arm that extended a big blue pistol, checked the blow just in time because he recognized the gun and the hand that held it, and then the blue muzzle spat flame and smoke and thunder, and a hail of lead crashed into the oncoming horde. At that range it was slaughter. The heavy slugs ripped through tense bodies to deal death to the men behind them. Through a swirling fog of smoke, Gordon saw men staggering and falling, heard one high-pitched shriek ring above the clamor, and saw a rose-colored turban tossed convulsively as it sank. A roar of dismay drowned the death cries as Gordon sprang through the open door and slammed it. "You've killed Othman," he roared. Lal Singh laughed in the fierce exuberance of the moment and shot home the bolt. Azizun was clinging to Gordon's arm, half-mad with terror, and the Kurds were clustered about him. Yusuf ibn Sulayman in the plumed helmet, scimitar in hand, and the other 5, armed with swords and daggers. "The girl came to us where we waited in the tunnel and cried out that they meant to slay you, Sahib," shouted Lal Singh, white teeth flashing in his black beard. "We came swiftly, snatching blades from weapon racks as we ran. Now we await your orders." In the other chamber, howls of fear and dismay that greeted the fall of Othman were turning into screams of bloodthirsty frenzy. Not lightly may a man slay a Sheikh Ez-Zurim, head of a cult that was old when England was a savage wilderness. The bolted door began to tremble under the impacts of battering hilts and frantic bodies. Ivan Constantine's voice was lifted like the slash of a saber above the clamor. "Out into the corridor, you dogs! Surround that chamber!" "Out of here, quick!" snapped Gordon, and led his followers at a run across the chamber to the opposite door. He did not know where it led, but there was no time to pick and choose. They had to escape the trap before it closed. They burst into a corridor that led off from the larger hall at right angles, and collided with a pack of Arab swordsmen hurrying in the direction of the noise. One was Mohammed ibn Ahmed. "Ya kalb!" yelped Yusuf ibn Sulayman, and glutted his resentment in a swipe that shattered the captain's helmet and stretched him dead on the floor. An instant of raking steel and snarling, straining effort, an Arab blade licking like a jet of blue lightning through a Kurdish heart, blades biting and men falling. And then Gordon and his people were fleeing down the corridor, leaving a huddled welter of writhing or motionless figures behind them. Only 5 Kurds now, and one of them was bleeding from a gashed shoulder. Into the corridor behind them burst a throng of wild figures that came pelting after them, a frantic vision of blazing eyes, gaping mouths, and waving blades. Guns banged and bullets spatted venomously on the wall. Ahead of the fugitives, a stair led upward. Beyond the stair, more men were rushing to head them off, as swordsmen from all over the palace came in answer to the unwanted din. Up the stair, Gordon had his arm about Azizun's waist, sweeping her along with her toes scarcely touching the floor, almost crushing her with the unconscious strength of his grasp. They swarmed up the stair as the mob came down the passage in full cry. They had almost reached the head when the crack of a luger split the din, and one of the Kurds groaned, stumbled, and fell backward headlong down the steps like a bundle of old clothes. The limp body crashed against the legs of the men just leaping on to the lower steps, and they went down in a blaspheming heap. Ivan Constantine was running down the corridor, firing as he came. Lal Singh whirled on the top step and snapped the empty pistol at him. Ivan instinctively dodged, leaping behind another man. Before he could fire again, his targets had gained the upper landing and were out of sight and range for the moment. They emerged into a broad hallway, and veiled women shrieked and scattered. But from the doorways came more menacing figures, tall blacks with broad scimitars. From all sides except one they converged on the invaders. These fled the only way open to them down the hall, toward a bronze door at the end. Gordon had no idea what it concealed, but that did not matter. There was no other place to go. The door stood partly open. Another realized their plight and their intention. A figure ran out of a side door just ahead of them and darted toward the bronze portal with a huge key in his hand. "The master of the girls," yelled Yusuf furiously. "He will lock the door in our faces for us to be butchered." Behind them, a dozen Sudani swordsmen were coming in long bounds, and the first of the horde from below were swarming into the hall from the stair. The master of the girls had accurately grasped the situation and acted boldly. If he could get into the chamber ahead of them and lock them out. But he did not reckon with the long legs of Lal Singh, which hurled the Sikh along at a speed not even the burdened Gordon could approximate. The Persian reached the door, then wheeled snarling and lifting a knife. But before he could strike, the heavy pistol, swinging like a battle axe in Lal Singh's hand, crushed his skull and hurled him dead to the floor. And over his twitching body, the panting, sweat-soaked fugitive stumbled across the threshold. Chapter 6. A Broken Trap. Not until the bronze door had been locked and bolted did Gordon look about, shaking the sweat from his eyes. And then he realized they were in a trap. They were in an enclosed balcony which hung above the pillared portico. Through a wide casement he could see the courtyard with its fountain and fluttering pigeons, the wall with its bronze-barred gate open, and beyond that the square and the broad, shaded street of Shalazar. Men were running down this street, weapons in their hands. Men were swarming through the open gate. The courtyard was a milling mass of furious humanity. The babel of voices was dominated by a many-throated shout that rose again and again, howling that the sheikh was slain. The sheikh was slain. Yusuf ibn Sulayman came to the window and stood beside Gordon. He spat, wiping blood from his beard. He had thrown away the plumed helmet. "What man can avert his fate?" he inquired without emotion. "We be 7 men and a chit of a girl, 7 swords against 500. "Is there any way out of here?" asked Gordon. The Kurd pointed toward the door, now re-echoing with the assault of steel-shod rifle butts. "Through that door and the swords outside." He nodded toward the window. "Or down those columns and through that pack of wolves in the courtyard. Nay, El Borak, we die here." Gordon nodded in silent agreement. The sun was setting. It would be at least an hour before Yar Ali Khan could possibly reach Kor. If he and the Gills started back at once, they could not reach Shalazar before dawn. And Gordon knew that as far as he and his companions were concerned, the game would be played out long before midnight. "Look," Yusuf laughed and pointed. "We Kurds are not the only careless fools. Here come the men who at sunset relieve the guard watching the stair." Far down the street, where it emerged into the plain, a group of men, small in the distance, had turned about and were hastening back toward the city. The setting sun struck glints from their rifles. Some distance behind them hastened another group. The men they were to have relieved. Yusuf laughed sardonically. They wish to be in at the slaughter. They fear they are missing sport. Fools to leave the stair unguarded. Yet what foe need they fear, with Borak hemmed in the palace like a trapped wolf? He sprang back as a volley rattled in the courtyard below. The bullets ripped through the sandalwood lattice work about the window. The mob had discovered the hiding place of their prey. They will be climbing up on ladders next. Doubtless, they'll have to climb to the window or break down the door to get to us, answered Gordon. That door looks pretty solid. They will break it with a ram, said Yusuf ibn Sulayman. Gordon shrugged his shoulders impatiently. There was no fatalism in his nature. He meant to fight to the last, bitter end. But he knew that the Kurds would fight too, while they could stand or see, simply because they trusted him and were proud of his leadership. An insistent knock banged the door and Constantine called, "Gordon, you're trapped. You're surrounded by 500 fighting men, crazy mad because you killed their sheikh. I'm the supreme power in Shalazar right now. I know you've got no ammunition. I've sent for a timber to batter down this door, and then we'll simply swamp you with numbers. Why don't you come out and surrender? I'll promise you a quick death instead of slow torture." "And I promise you a knife in your guts," snarled Gordon. "Come and get us if you can." Constantine swore, then laughed. They heard muttering voices, the quick pad of feet outside the door, the jangle of weapons. Suddenly there came a gust of firing, a spattering of bullets against the door, and then Ivan's angry voice cursing his followers for wasting ammunition. Down in the courtyard the crowd milled and raved, dark arms upflung brandishing clenched fists or weapons, dark faces upturned to howl imprecations. They filled the small courtyard, and men massed thickly in the square outside the gate. These fired sporadically at the balcony, and some of their bullets smashed into windows above it, bringing feminine screams. A voice yelling angrily from the portico below put a stop to the shooting. Gordon glanced at his men. Their eyes burned wolfishly and they grinned without mirth, thumbing their red-stained blades. They knew they were going to die, but they were not afraid. He did not insult them by reminding them that they might have escaped while he was fighting with the sheikh's men in the chamber where he confronted Constantine. He did ask, "How did you get there so quick? The fight had been going on only a few moments when you were at the door." Azizun, crouched shivering on a divan, answered him, "I saw Musa leading you to the chamber where Baghila waited. I had never seen him, but I heard a slave speak his Feringhi name, Ivan Constantine. I knew him then, and knew that he knew you and would expose you as an impostor. So I ran to the tunnel and told the men." Lal Singh, looking down into the courtyard, spoke casually. "They rear ladders against the pillars." Simultaneously, the door began to jerk and quiver as a heavy timber, swung between brawny arms, smashed against it. "Drag the heaviest divan across the door to brace it," directed Gordon. "It's a strong door. It won't be easy to break it with a wooden ram." He bound up the wounded Kurd's shoulder with strips torn from his shirt and told him to watch the door. With the others, Gordon took his stand at the window. The sun had set and twilight was darkening into blue dusk. Men were scrambling up the ladders with knives in their teeth. The ladders were too short. Men climbed on the shoulders of their comrades, balancing precariously, while they thrust up at the men in the window and tried to get a hold on the ledge. The Sikh prodded them with his long saber, and they lost their footing and tumbled, 3 or 4 together, down upon the heads of the mob. The others fell back sullenly, and the defenders saw them pull the ladders down and begin the job of fastening them together, end to end. No more shots were fired. With the palace full of their people, the men in the courtyard dared not risk bullets. Gordon was content that his last great fight should be fought out with naked steel. The men in the hall finally decided that the timber they were using for a ram was too light to have any effect on the thick bronze portal and the massive lock and hinges. Gordon heard Constantine ordering someone to go search for a heavier ram. There came a lull in the fighting that was like a moment of quiet in the middle of a hurricane. Down in the courtyard, the roar of the mob had sunk to a sullen muttering, punctuated by the banging of hammers. The warriors in the balcony took advantage of the interlude to catch their breath and bind up wounds. Azizun crept to Gordon's side, her eyes dilated with fear. Little of comfort he could offer her from his great store of pity for her. He had cast the dice and lost for himself for them all. There was nothing he could do for her now, except to interpose his body between hers and their enemies in the last charge, and save a merciful sword stroke for her in the end. Sensing the desperation of their position, she lay like a child face down on the divan beside him, clasping his hands and pressing her cheeks against them. Gordon sat quietly, awaiting the last grapple with the patience of the wild in which he had spent so much of his life, and though his expression was composed, his eyes burned like the reflection of flame on black water. Dusk deepened quickly into darkness. Below in the courtyard, torches tossed, redly limning fierce faces, streaming crimson on blades that would be stained with a redder smear before midnight. The hammers had ceased. The voice of the mob was a sustained, wordless roar, deep with menace and edged with hate. Azizun thrust her fingers in her ears to shut it out. Feet pounded down the hall, fierce voices shouted, and the door staggered under an impact that made the walls vibrate and brought every man in the balcony to his feet, tense with the realization that the death grip was imminent. The door would not stand long under such blows. The end of a ladder appeared at the window, swayed erratically and crashed against the ledge. A Kurd caught at it, but Lal Singh checked him. "Wait till they get on it." The clamor rose deafeningly, a high-pitched wolf-pack yell of exultation. In the glare of the wildly tossing torches, Gordon saw men detaching from the mass below and swarming up the ladder, like spray tossed up by a foaming tide. Their upturned eyes gleamed whitely in the glare. The bronze door thundered to the assault on the other side. It was iron meeting bronze now, and the upper hinge began to give way, the bolts to bend, the metal panels to crack. Azizun shrank and quivered as if each blow impacted on her tender body. The only light in the balcony chamber was the dim reflection of the torches outside. In that gloom Gordon saw Lal Singh's white teeth flash a grin of farewell. The eyes of the Kurds burned weirdly in the shadows. The giant Sikh leaned out of the window, laughing down in the contorted faces of the men below him, just out of reach of their up-lunging blades. He gripped the ends of the ladder, one in each hand, pulling at one, pushing against the other. His legs were braced, the muscles stood out in ridges on his mighty forearms. Slowly, with all its dead weight of wood and clinging men, the ladder began to revolve in his hands. One end swung out from the wall and the climbers screamed, dropped knives and caught at rungs. Lal Singh gasped in the agony of supreme muscular exertion, and the ladder swayed, toppled sidewise and rushed earthward with its howling cargo, to crash into the packed mob below. Lal Singh's laughter mocked the screams that welled up from the courtyard where writhing figures, pinned under the fallen beams, clawed at the tiles. With a thunderous crash, a great piece broke out of the door, giving a glimpse of wild faces and dark arms swinging a long timber capped with iron. Another smashing blow and the upper half of the door gave way and broke off raggedly, leaving an aperture that was instantly filled with flashing steel and snarling visages, as the attackers dropped the ram and strove to thrust open the remnant of the door with their bare hands, or, failing that, to clamber over the lower part of the door. This, wedged by the divan, formed a jagged barrier, breast high, and at this rampart the defenders met the attackers. Steel glinted back and forth in swift flickerings over the jagged metal edge. Dark hands, gripping the broken door, fell from wrists under the bite of swift steel. Men howled like mad dogs. A Kurd, leaning out too far to thrust, fouled his steel and had his skull split before he could twist it clear. Every man in the balcony chamber was streaming blood. "Back, you fools!" yelled Ivan, standing behind the warriors. "Take the ram and break away the lower half of the door." He snapped his empty pistol at the men beyond the door, then threw it away with a curse. The Cossack's fury seemed tinged with madness. Too long had this handful of men kept his slayers at bay. They fell back, black Sudanese, lean Arabs, and squat Mongols, dragging their dead from before the door, and lifted the great ram again. Lal Singh and the Kurds shook the sweat and blood out of their eyes and took a fresh grip on their blood-slippery swords. Gordon remembered the window and stepped to the ledge. Another ladder had been propped against the wall, and this time many men gripped its base firmly. A score were swarming up it. Gordon gripped the long knife, waiting for them to come within reach. He drew a long breath and lifted his head to catch, for the last time, the breath of night wind that brought him the tang of snow-freshened peaks. And with his head lifted, he stood motionless, staring out over the crowd. The torches in the courtyard and the square accentuated the darkness beyond, but he made out a dark mass moving down the street. It was men, many men, marching quietly in compact formation. Who could it be? Reinforcements, of course, more of the hidden ones returning from some raid. But why did they come so quietly? The men on the ladder were only a few rungs away, climbing in grim silence, while the crowd below yelled and hooted. All eyes in that mob were turned upward toward the balcony window. No one saw the men who came on so silently and with such grim intent. Only a few yards separated them now from the backs of the crowd in the square, and suddenly, stunningly, a crash of musketry ripped the night apart. Fire fringed that black mass. A storm of lead tore through the crowd outside the gate. Men went down in rows and files. Every man in the courtyard jerked around, struck dumb. The battering at the door ceased suddenly, but hell burst loose in the square. Fired at point-blank range, that volley had torn lanes through the close-packed throng, and the survivors, wheeling in stupefied amazement, got a wild glimpse of fierce, stranger faces glaring over muzzles that almost touched them. Even as they turned, those muzzles blazed death in their faces, and screaming like damned souls, those who still lived gave way and surged blindly into the gate, sweeping all before them. Men went down, trampled in the rush, and the ladder rocked, toppled, and crashed in that dark tide of frantic humanity. The crowd in the court, ignorant of what was happening, was swept along by the stampede and lashed into an equal panic. All swept toward the portico, screaming and clawing in a heaving mass. Behind them came men in an irresistible wave, sending up a war cry to the stars that brought the hot blood surging to Gordon's brain. "The Gilzai!" he roared, stunned by the miracle. They came into the courtyard headlong, rifles blazing at point-blank range, and their volleys mowed men down like ripe grain. In an instant the courtyard was littered with writhing shapes. Men swarming over the wall toppled down with lead in their backs, and the invaders fell on the howling, fear-mad crowd jammed in the portico. They plunged knives into straining backs, flailed at the tossing heads with steel-shod rifle butts. The guilt of 1,000 abominable crimes stained the men of Shalazar, but retribution had struck at last, like lightning from the hills. It was less fight than massacre. The sudden, unexpected blow broke and scattered the hidden ones like birds before a storm. They made no attempt to rally. They fled away over the wall by the scores, jammed and fought their way into the palace in a maddened crush, and before they could close the doors, the blood-mad tribesmen were in after them. To Gordon, staring down into the courtyard where a few torches smoked and smoldered on the ground, it was as if a tornado had stormed across the court, littering it with corpses, and swept on into the palace. In the halls and chambers below raved the sounds of slaughter, yells, shots, stamp of swift feet, impact of blows, and the thud of heavy bodies taking the floor. Out in the hall, the Sudani had thrown down the ram and fled down the stair, the Arabs and Mongols pelting after them, all crazy with panic. They did not heed Constantine's blows and curses, but swept him along with them. At the head of the stair, he extricated himself, yelling and blaspheming like a madman. One glance into the hall below was enough for him. In that bedlam downstairs he recognized the end of his ambitions, and a kind of madness seized the Cossack. He turned and ran back toward the broken door, a heavy saber in his hand. "Come out, Gordon," he yelled frenziedly, his eyes blazing insanely. "Come out if you call yourself a man. I'm beaten, but I'll take you to hell with me. Damn you, come out." The fire of fighting that burned in Gordon's veins was no less furious than Constantine's madness. He threw off Lal Singh's restraining hand, tore aside the broken door, and rushed into the hall, gripping the Khyber knife. He came like a gust of storm wind, plunging in under the lifted sword with a berserk fury that swept away all caution. with all the impetuousness of his headlong rush behind the lunge. His long knife drove to the haft in the Cossack's body, and then the heavy saber hilt, wielded with the convulsive strength of a dying man, crashed down on his head, and blackness fell over him like an ebony curtain. Slowly, through the soft darkness that surrounded him, Gordon groped his way back to consciousness. Hearing came before sight, for before he could see anything but the blind, pulsing waves of darkness, he could hear voices, mumbling, indistinct and meaningless. Then a dim glow began, high up, like a star seen from a black pit. It grew, expanded, became the mellow light shed softly from a bronze lamp. Then he knew who he was and remembered something of what had happened. He was aware of a dull and terrible hurt in his head, and knew that it was bandaged. He began to understand the voices, to understand the blurred, wavering visions that met his eyes. He was lying on a couch, and dimly he saw Azizun crouching beside him. Her eyes looked unnaturally great and dark in her pale face. From time to time she placed a fresh pad of dampened cloth on his head. Other faces floated behind hers, bearded faces. He recognized them: Yusuf ibn Sulayman, Lal Singh, Yar Ali Khan, Baber Khan. Lal Singh was speaking, and by a tremendous effort of will, Gordon made himself understand what the Sikh was saying. "I still do not understand how you arrived here when you did. Borak said you could not reach Kor before nightfall, and that it would be dawn before you could return to Shalazar. I met the Gills about halfway between the Gorge of Ghosts and Kor," answered Afridi. "The men I sent to guide Borak returned to Kor before dawn," said Baber Khan. "They told me they had heard the voice of the jinn, and that Borak intended plunging on into Gulistan. First, I beat them with an ox goad for allowing him to go on without them. Then I mounted every able-bodied man in Kor and brought them in all haste. Devils or men, had I known he intended invading this country, I would never have let him leave Kor unless I accompanied him with all my swords. We left our horses in the Gorge of Ghosts. Yar Ali Khan led us through the secret door in the cliff wall, and we rushed the guard in the cleft and cut his head off before he knew we were near. It was night when we reached the stair. It was unguarded. We climbed the cliffs and came on quietly. The dogs did not see us until we loosed a volley into their backs." Gordon forced his lips apart and murmured, "Baber Khan." Instantly the bearded faces clustered close about him, dark eyes gleaming with both hope and anxiety. "Sahib, you know us, you can speak." "How did the fight go?" Gordon whispered. Strange how hard it was to whisper. "There was no fight, Sahib. The dogs fled before us. The halls are choked with their bodies. Those who live have fled, taking the body of their accursed sheikh with them. The Cossack lies dead in an upper hall. We hold Shalazar. You are lying in an inner chamber. I have sent men to get horses and ride for a hakim. We will have a Feringhi doctor for you if we have to bring one from Kabul. The cult of the Hidden Ones is shattered. The few who yet live have fled into the mountains." "The women in the city," Gordon muttered. "They are slaves, stolen from Persia and India. We have collected them under guard in the Seraglio," said Lal Singh. "Not one has been harmed. Later we will arrange to send them back to their homes." "Good." Gordon sank back and the shadows began to close about him. "You have saved your head, Baber Khan. The Emir will pardon you for this night's work. The three-bladed dagger is broken. His voice sank into silence, and Azizun cried out, throwing her arms about him. Yar Ali Khan clutched his beard in agony. Allah, he is dying. Lal Singh, his hand on Gordon's hard wrist, shook his head. Nay, he sleeps. His skull is broken, but it is not written that the blow of a hilt should slay Borak. He will live to fulfill the destiny the gods have given him. Thank you for listening.